Chapter 2149. Lin Sun opened the gate of the courtyard. "Are you fucking deaf? How dare you keep our young master waiting for so long?" The retainer who was knocking on the door raised his hand and slapped towards Lin Sun's face in the air. Just because of a disagreement, he directly attacked. This retainer was obviously used to running amok. Otherwise, he would never dare to act so arrogantly. Lin Sun rarely encountered such things in recent years, so he couldn't help feeling a little surprised. However, he didn't slow down. The retainer's palm was directly grasped by Lin Sun and couldn't move an inch. To everyone's surprise, the retainer was not surprised but angry. He said, "You dog, how dare you block me? Are you tired of living?" As he said, he kicked Lin Sun. It was very aggressive, as if only he could attack, and the other party could only take a passive position to be beaten. Even a subordinate dared to be so insolent, so one could imagine that he definitely had a lot of confidence. Otherwise, this kind of character would have been killed countless times already. Crack! As soon as the retainer kicked, his wrist was twisted by Lin Sun. He screamed in pain, staggered, and was directly pressed to kneel on the ground by Lin Sun. This series of actions was done in one go. Lin Sun didn't make a sound. He looked indifferent, but his black eyes were full of coldness. He came to the door for no reason. When he knocked on the door, he was so rude and unreasonable. When he just opened the door, he was so insolent and arrogant. If he hadn't figured out the reason, Lin Sun would have killed such a reckless thing. "How dare you? How dare you touch the people of Star Evil Mountain? You really don't know what's good for you." A group of retainers around the man in a fiery red crane cloak scolded and glared at Lin Sun with a look of disbelief. The middle-aged man from the mist-hidden house was also stunned. He quickly transmitted his voice to Lin Sun. "Senior, please calm down and be patient. These are all people of Star Evil Mountain." According to the explanation of the middle-aged man, Star Evil Mountain was a huge force in the Dark World. Its influence was second only to the three Dark Giants. The man in a fiery red crane cloak was Shirliji, the legitimate son of a supreme elder of Star Evil Mountain. He had an extremely distinguished status. In a turbulent and dangerous place like the Dark World, there was no lack of vicious people, but very few people were willing to offend Shirliji. The reason was that his father was an extremely protective and hot-tempered fiend, who was also known as the Dark Devouring Fiend Emperor. Moreover, the forces of the Star Fiend Mountain were also extremely powerful. Especially in recent years, they faintly showed signs of catching up to the three Dark Giants. Interesting. Shirliji, who was dressed in a fiery red crane cloak, laughed. The retainer who was forced to kneel on the ground crawled over and cried out in grief and indignation, "Young master, you have to help this lowly one. Aren't you ashamed?" Shirliji's palm slapped down. Bang! The head of the lackey exploded, and blood splattered all over the place. A few droplets of blood landed on Shirliji's face, but he paid them no heed at all. Instead, he licked them lightly with the tip of his tongue. The expressions of the subordinates by his side changed, and they went silent like cicadas in winter. "My friend, my retainer was too rude just now. Now, he has paid the price for it." Shirliji looked at Lin Sun and said in a feminine voice, "As the old saying goes, you should look at the owner before beating the dog. You forced my retainer to kneel in front of me. Do you also have to pay the price?" The lean middle-aged man next to him was sweating profusely. He hurriedly said, "Child, sure, ignorance is not a crime. This senior is a distinguished guest of our hidden mist house. Can you make an exception? Don't blame me for being rude if you talk too much." Shirliji glanced at him. The lean middle-aged man immediately shut up and winked at Lin Sun frequently, as if telling him to bear it and not to be impulsive. Lin Sun turned a blind eye to him and said, "I'll give you a chance. Disappear from my sight now, or you'll bear the consequences." Shirliji was stunned for a moment, as if he couldn't believe his ears. The retainers around him were also astonished. They couldn't believe that someone dared to speak to their young master like this. You seem to be very confident. Shirliji looked at Lin Sun as if he was getting to know him again. However, with his vision, he couldn't see how terrible the young man in front of him was. In addition, he had been used to running amok since he started his cultivation. Even if he met someone stronger than him, he would not dare to provoke him easily because of his identity. Therefore, Lin Sun's strong posture at the moment made Shirliji a little uncomfortable. He couldn't help but frown and asked, "Is this the first time you came to the dark world by boat?" This was a test. However, Lin Sun was a little impatient. God knew how many people of the Divine Sunshine sect and the Hidden Land realm had been killed by him. How could they care about a child from the Star Evil Mountain? He looked at the lean middle-aged man next to him with cold eyes and said, "If I kill them, will I implicate your hidden mist house?" His words made the lean middle-aged man's hair stand on end. He hurriedly said, "Senior, please don't be angry. Let's talk nicely. Why do we have to fight?" "Ha ha, did you hear that? This guy threatened to kill us." Shirliji was so angry that he laughed. He thought he had been patient enough. Who would have thought that the man in front of him didn't know what was good for him? The retainers also laughed with cold eyes. It was obvious that this was the first time this guy went to the dark world. He didn't know the weight of the Star Evil Mountain at all. "Hurry up and apologize to our young master," a man shouted, and his whole body was full of killing intent. The other retainers also shouted one after another, all showing their killing intent. Ignorance also has to pay the price. Lin Sun finally became impatient and let out a sigh. Boom! The next moment, a terrible and boundless killing intent surged out like a raging storm. In the eyes of the people, Lin Sun, who was originally ordinary, seemed to have turned into a god coming out of the purgatory of killing at this moment. Bang bang bang! There was a burst of noise. Those retainers didn't have time to struggle, and were forced to kneel down by the terrible power emitted from Lin Sun. Their heads hit the ground one by one, and their kneecaps were broken. Screams also rang out one after another. "No!" Shirliji roared, his long hair flying as he struggled with all his might. But in the blink of an eye, his body also seemed to be pressed down by a divine mountain. He lay on the ground like a dog eating shit, and the skin all over his body cracked and blood flowed out. The lean middle-aged man was stunned as if he was struck by lightning. Those retainers were all experts from the Star Evil Mountain. The stronger ones had the cultivation of the Quasi-Emperor realm, and the weaker ones had the ability of the Saint King realm. But now, before they could struggle, they were suppressed. The most frightening thing was that the other party didn't even make a move. Just the power emitted from his body made them powerless to struggle and resist. It should be known that the forces in the dark world were different from the outside world. The descendants of every sect were mostly ruthless characters who had wandered into the dark world, and there was no lack of evil people who lived on the edge of a knife. Especially in the Star Evil Mountain, the descendants of the sects were a mix of good and bad people. There were villains who had become bandits, evil tyrants whose hands were stained with blood, and demons who had committed heinous crimes in the outside world. There was no lack of such evil people among the retainers who followed Shirliji. But now all of them were kneeling. Even a noble figure like Shirliji was no exception. When he looked at Lin Sun again, the lean middle-aged man's eyes were filled with deep awe. "Tell me, why did you come to me?" Lin Sun looked down at Shirliji on the ground with deep eyes. "Kill me if you dare." Shirliji was full of anger and his eyes almost popped out. For the first time in his life, he was defeated so badly and tasted the humiliation of kneeling on the ground for the first time. "Who says it?" Lin Sun moved his eyes and looked at those retainers. These retainers looked at each other and no one answered. Lin Sun flicked his finger. Bang! A bloody hole was pierced through the space between the eyebrows of one of the retainers, and he silently died on the spot. "You say it." Lin Sun looked at one of them. The retainer trembled all over and said in a trembling voice, "Young lord, He heard that you took the purple jade token of Miss Qing to take this ship. He suspected that there was something fishy between you and Miss Qing, so he planned to come to ask. Lin Sun frowned. Qing was the woman in a cyan dress with a blood umbrella in her hand, exuding a mysterious and enchanting aura. In the underground world of Lin An City, Lin Sun was amazed by the unique elegance of this woman. In order to compensate Lin Sun, this woman once gave him a purple token. This time, Lin Sun took the boundary ship of the Misty House and lived in the courtyard on the top floor. It was indeed because of the purple token in his hand that Lin Sun received such special care. He turned over his palm and the purple token appeared. Just because of this? It's not about the token. The retainer hesitated for a moment. Ignoring Shirlaji's murderous eyes, he braced himself and said, "All the people in the dark world know that our young lord is infatuated with Miss Qing and regards her as his own." Only then did Lin Sun realize that it was because of the token he obtained that Shirlaji suspected that he had a close relationship with Qing. That was why Shirlaji came here aggressively to find out the truth. You can't catch up with her, so you stop others from contacting her. You are really overbearing. Lin Sun sneered. Shirlaji, who was kneeling on the ground, looked uncertain. He gritted his teeth and said, "Then tell me, what's the relationship between you and Qing?" "It doesn't matter," Lin Sun answered casually. But Shirlaji didn't believe it and said angrily, "If it doesn't matter, will she give you her purple jade token? That's the treasure she has been carrying since she was a child. In all the years I've been pursuing her, she's never shown it to me. But now this token has fallen into your hand. How can you say that it has nothing to do with her? Do you really think I'm an idiot?" There was unconcealable resentment in his voice. Lin Sun looked strange and his eyes were strange. After all, this guy really came to make trouble for him because of inexplicable jealousy. He couldn't help saying, "Your name is very good." Shirlaji was stunned. "What do you mean?" Lin Sun replied seriously, "I think you really lost your mind." Chapter 2150. He lost his mind. The middle-aged man almost laughed out loud. Shirlaji was furious and felt that he had suffered a great humiliation. Lin Sun thought for a while, and took out an antique bronze mirror. "Do you recognize this thing?" Shirlaji was struck by lightning and cried out involuntarily, She even gave you the bronze mirror to guide the way to the dark land?" His voice was full of jealousy and anger. "You still say you have nothing to do with Qing? The bronze mirror of guidance." Lin Sun was lost in thought. When he left Lin An City, Qing once took the initiative to find him and said some intriguing words. "If you meet a man named Lin Sun in the future, tell him that Qing of Misty House wants to meet him. At that time, I will tell him something beneficial and harmless." At that time, Lin Sun walked in the world as Yu Xian, but Qing seemed to have guessed something. Later, Qing gave him the bronze mirror of guidance, and said that there was a map inside. With the map, Lin Sun could find her. At that time, she would give Lin Sun an irresistible reward. "So, you also know the Dark Land?" Lin Sun asked. Shirlaji said, "That's the primordial ancestral land of Misty House. Everyone in the dark world knows it. But without the bronze mirror of guidance, no one can find the Dark Land." Lin Sun said, "So, the Dark Land is in the dark world?" Shirlaji said, "Isn't it nonsense?" He felt that Lin Sun had lost his mind at this moment. Only then did Lin realize that Qing definitely had a special intention when he gave him the bronze mirror for guiding the way. What kind of beneficial and harmless thing did she want to tell him? "Senior, now that the misunderstanding has been cleared up, could you spare Child Sure and others for the sake of Misty House?" The middle-aged man stepped forward and smiled apologetically. Shirlaji and others also looked at Lin Sun. At this time, no matter how stupid they were, they realized that they had kicked a big iron plate. Lin Sun said casually, "It's easy to live. Give me an emperor treasure, and I will let you go." An emperor treasure? Shirlaji and the others were dumbfounded. This was an exorbitant demand. Even though Shirlaji was of noble status, and his father was the dark devouring demon emperor of the Starfiend Mountain, he only had a single monarch artifact with him. Haha, a mere quasi-emperor dares to lay his hands on an emperor weapon. How bold of him! Is he not afraid of bursting himself to death? A cold laugh suddenly rang out. A black-robed old man had appeared in the courtyard not far away. He had white hair, a youthful complexion, eyes that were sharp like a hawk, and his entire body emanated an imposing aura that belonged solely to an Emperor Realm figure. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, "Old guy, be careful of your words." Hiss! All the spectators gasped. When has a quasi-emperor dared to reprimand and threaten a true martial emperor? This was simply a case of an old man who had eaten frost and was tired of living, especially the burly middle-aged man. He was so shocked that his soul almost flew out of his body. He quickly transmitted his voice. "Senior, this is a great emperor of the evil path from the primordial world's demon province's netherworld Taoist sect. You'd better apologize quickly and lower your head, or you'll lose your life." After that, his whole body was soaked in cold sweat. The martial Emperor Realm could not be insulted, and the black-robed old man was a demon emperor. His power and terror were boundless. Which quasi-emperor in the world dared to slander him? The black-robed old man was also stunned, and then his face suddenly darkened. His eyes were surging with a terrifying light. "Young man, do you know how to write the word death?" Lin Sun sneered. "You're so old, but you still can't write. How about I teach you?" Shirlaji and the others, as well as the burly middle-aged man, were all dumbfounded. There was only one thought in their mind. Crazy! This guy was absolutely crazy. Who in the world dared to offend an Emperor Realm in such a frenzied manner? Look how arrogant this kid is. No wonder he fled to the Dark World on the Boundary ship. He must have caused a terrible disaster. How dare he be so disrespectful to an Emperor Realm? Even if he fled to the Dark World, he wouldn't survive for more than a few days. "Young man, hurry up and kneel down to apologize." There was a burst of noise, some ridiculing and some disdainful. On the upper floor of the Boundary ship, there were many courtyards. The noise here had already alarmed the guests in those courtyards. When they saw Lin Sun slandering an Emperor Realm in such a way, they were also stunned and couldn't believe it. Those noisy voices were made by these people. The black-robed old man said with a gloomy face, "Well, I'd like to ask you how to write the word death." As he said, he slapped the air with his palm. Boom! In the void, thunder roared, and the rolling black light condensed into a giant black palm, emitting a terrible fluctuation of Emperor Realm law, which caused the void to collapse and explode. At this moment, all the experts who witnessed this scene felt suffocated, and a chill ran down their spines. The power of the Emperor Realm was vividly demonstrated in this palm. Even looking at it from a distance, it made people feel desperate. "It's over." The burly middle-aged man's hands and feet were cold. If this senior died, how could he explain it to Miss Qingying? Shirlaji and the others were ecstatic. How could they expect that an Emperor Realm would appear halfway, which was equivalent to helping them eliminate a great enemy? The onlookers couldn't help trembling in their hearts. This was the consequence of slandering an Emperor Realm. This was the so-called Emperor Realm couldn't be insulted. In a flash, Lin Sun stood still, but a wisp of sword chi swept out from his hair. Swish! As the sword chi slashed out, it was like a light that tore the sky, so bright and dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. Immediately after that, an earth-shattering explosion resounded, and the entire realm ship shook violently. Some of the meteorites floating in the nearby starry sky exploded simultaneously at this moment, and they transformed into powder that drifted in the air. Before the rumble had died down and the smoke and dust had dispersed, an enraged cry resounded. "How is it possible?" The voice came from the black-robed old man. At this time, people's vision finally recovered, and they saw the black-robed old man, who was regarded as a god and couldn't be slandered, with a face full of shock and anger. On the other hand, a bloody sword wound had been torn open on his chest, causing his skin and flesh to split open while fresh blood flowed out without end. Just one sword strike injured an Emperor realm expert. The whole place was silent, not a sound could be heard. The middle-aged man, Shirlaji, and the onlookers were all dumbfounded, and their eyes were in a trance. Who could imagine that the arrogant quasi-emperor, the young man who despised and slandered the Emperor realm, had such ability? It was incredible! At this time, the sword spirit leaf stood on Lin Sun's shoulder and said casually, "It's an old man at the second level of the Emperor realm. Do you want to keep him as a live target or kill him directly?" "Kill him." Lin Sun sighed helplessly. Even if the old man at the second level of the Emperor realm was used as a target, he couldn't kill him now. Only then did people notice the existence of Leaf, and they felt dizzy again. The conversation was too casual. What did they think the Emperor realm was? A prey that could be taken at will? A fish on the chopping board? But when he noticed the sword spirit Leaf, it was too late for the black-robed old man to be angry, and there was only a bone-chilling feeling left in his heart. He sensed a deadly aura of danger. Swish! Without hesitation, he teleported to the void to escape. Even if this was the most dangerous Dark Night star zone, and even if he was very likely to die once he got lost in it, he couldn't care less. As a great emperor of the diabolism, he had experienced countless dangers and slaughters to achieve his current cultivation. He was very sure that if he didn't escape now, he was doomed to die. "Old man, you still don't know how to write the word death? Why are you running? Come here, I'll teach you." Leaf smiled, and when his voice sounded, he had already turned into a stream of light and chased after the old man. In the blink of an eye, Leaf and the black-robed old man both disappeared in the vast starry sky. It was only at this moment that the shocked crowd suddenly realized that the great emperor of the diabolism from the Netherworld sect had fled without a fight. The middle-aged man was in a trance. The impact of this scene was so great that he couldn't calm down for a while. Shirlaji and the others were scared out of their wits. Who could believe that a dignified Emperor realm cultivator was scared away? Those onlookers were like frosted eggplants at this moment. They closed their mouths tightly and their expressions changed constantly. Before, they had ridiculed Lin Sun, thinking that he was arrogant and ignorant. But what happened now was like a slap in the face, making them feel uncomfortable. In just a moment, a shrill scream rang out in the distance of the starry sky, and then it stopped abruptly. Then, Leaf turned into a stream of light and returned. He raised his hand and a storage belt fell into Lin Sun's hand. "This old guy looks majestic, but his family is quite shabby. He only has 2 low-grade mysterious Emperor weapons." Leaf was a little disappointed. Only then did people recognize that the storage belt was originally wrapped around the black-robed old man, but now it had become a trophy. Obviously, the scream just now meant that the great emperor of the diabolism from the Netherworld sect had died before he could reach the dark world. And his death could be said to be "disaster comes from the mouth." The scene became more and more silent, and it was oppressive to the point of suffocation. Killing an Emperor realm expert was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. This made Lin Sun and Yi full of fatal danger in their eyes. Lin Sun put away the storage belt and looked at Shirlaji, who was kneeling on the ground. This time, before Lin Sun spoke, Shirlaji, who had already turned pale with fright, took out a crystal-clear red jade axe. This was also the only Emperor weapon he had. "Fellow Taoist, I beg you to spare us just this once," Shirlaji begged with a sad face. Lin Sun looked at the red jade axe and was surprised to find that it was a high-grade mysterious Emperor weapon, containing a total of 66 Emperor treasure tattoos. This was very precious. It was only 1 grade away from giving birth to a weapon spirit. Putting away the martial scarlet axe, Lin Sun paid no attention to Shirliji and the others who were kneeling on the ground in fear. Instead, he looked around and said calmly, "I'm afraid before, many people have spoken rudely to me. Should they pay for it? Here comes the update. Thank you Qi Banqing for your reward. Goldfish, only then did I realize that the monthly votes for these few days are actually double, and it will end tomorrow." Chapter 2151. Those onlookers who could live on the top floor of the boundary ship were naturally regarded as distinguished guests by the Misty House. None of them was simple, but after witnessing the Evil Path's Emperor's death, they were so shocked that their scalps went numb and their hearts were filled with horror. Therefore, when Lin Sun proposed to let those who had ridiculed him pay the price, they obediently took out some compensation even though they were extremely uncomfortable. Elixirs, magic materials, rare treasures, everything was available. Lin Sun didn't care about it anymore. He glanced at Shirliji and others who were kneeling on the ground and said, "Don't let me see you again." He turned around and walked into the courtyard. Shirliji and the others heaved a long sigh of relief before scrambling out of the area. Third senior sister just said that when I arrived in the dark world, I didn't have to take the initiative to look for him, and second senior brother would be able to detect my presence. I just don't know if second senior brother will meet me if he really detects my trace. Back to the courtyard, Lin Sun couldn't help frowning when he thought of the purpose of coming to the dark world. Besides, the words left by the young man with golden cicada only told him to solve the problem, and there were no other clues. Lin Sun didn't know where to start. Maybe I can go to the hidden place and meet the mysterious girl Qingying? Lin Sun thought. The power of the Misty House couldn't be underestimated. In every city in the primordial world, there was an underground black market, and the controller of these black markets was the Misty House. Before, Lin Sun had never thought that the primordial place of the Misty House, a force all over the primordial world, should be in the dark world. Just as Lin Sun was thinking, Xi's voice suddenly sounded, "A new nameless supreme venerable has appeared." This sentence, like a thunder, made Lin Sun stiff all over. Finally, did he come? On this day, the taboo order power that seemed to have no master suddenly underwent a shocking change throughout the starry sky's ancient path heavens. It was as if a new master had appeared in a cage that no one was watching over. It appeared. From today on, do we have to live in the shadow of the taboo order again? I really don't know what the world will become. Sigh. On this day, countless great figures that possessed extraordinary cultivation sensed the change in the order of the grand Tao in the universe, and a wisp of gloominess arose in their hearts. To most living beings on the ancient path in the starry sky, today was no different from the past, and they didn't notice at all that a boundlessly terrifying existence had traversed the void and arrived from the other side of the starry sky. Black-yellow Tao Court. The heart of Taishu Hong, who was meditating, shook abruptly, and he was jolted awake. He stood up and walked out of his place of cultivation. When he raised his head and looked up, he noticed that the sky had suddenly been covered by the forbidden energy of order that was pitch black like ink. At that instant, Taishu Hong's pupils shrank. Rumble! In the pitch-black sky, there was a thunderous roar, and a forbidden aura of destruction enveloped the entire heavenly yellow Tao Court. What happened? A forbidden aura. Heavens! How could this be? At this moment, countless exclamations of surprise resounded out. All the disciples of the dark yellow Tao Court were alarmed, and they stopped what they were doing and stared dumbfoundedly at the sky. A strand of indescribable panic and terror spread along with this. Even if it was an Emperor Realm figure, all of them were in a panic, and they didn't know why this forbidden energy of order would descend onto their dark yellow Tao Court. Activate the mountain guarding Grand Formation. Everyone, quickly retreat into the Grand Formation. Don't act arbitrarily without orders. Right amidst this oppressive and panicked atmosphere, Taishu Hong's dignified and powerful voice resounded, and it surged through the heavens and the earth. At the same time, Taishu Hong took a deep breath, and his figure teleported to arrive at the restricted area at the back of the mountain. This place was suffused with chaotic chi, and lightning faintly flickered within it. The ancient mottled heavenly yellow Tao tablet stood towering there, and it emanated an obscure and mysterious sheen. Taishu Hong heaved a sigh of relief in his heart when he saw the heavenly yellow Tao tablet. The heavenly yellow Tao tablet was a precious chaotic treasure that was born in an unknown place, and it possessed a miraculous and unfathomable power. It was capable of resisting and concealing the forbidden energy of order. During the countless years when the last imperial exalt, nameless, was in charge of the forbidden energy of order, the reason the heavenly yellow Tao court was able to maintain neutrality and not obey the orders of the imperial exalt was because of the existence of this heavenly yellow Tao tablet. Sect Master. Swish. A wave of fluctuation arose in space before two figures appeared. The figure on the left was tall, wore a Taoist robe, and his gray hair was disheveled. Shockingly, it was Imperial Ancestor Greenleaf. During the Tao discussion that day, Imperial Ancestor Greenleaf had once made an appearance to acknowledge Ra Su, who'd appeared as an heir of the Origin Convergence Tao court. By Imperial Ancestor Greenleaf's side was a man in linen clothes with a firm and chilly expression. He was a living fossil of the heavenly yellow Tao court, Imperial Ancestor Shuang. Just like Imperial Ancestor Greenleaf, he didn't head to the other side of the starry sky to search for the Grand Tao, and he'd chosen to stay instead. Presently, only the two of them were Imperial Ancestor realm existences that held down the fort in the heavenly yellow Tao court. Martial uncles. Taishu Hong cupped his hands. Imperial Ancestor Greenleaf and Imperial Ancestor Shui Ying nodded with extremely heavy expressions. Obviously, they'd noticed that the situation today wasn't right. Perhaps this is an unprecedented calamity, but with the heavenly yellow Tao tablet here, it won't cause our heavenly yellow Tao court to end. Imperial Ancestor Greenleaf said. Is that so? Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded in the sky. Following that, the forbidden order energy that was like a black cloud that covered the sky violently rolled and paved a staircase that descended from the sky. A godlike figure with his hands behind his back walked out from the depths of the staircase. With every step he took, the world wailed and everything trembled as if they were submitting to him. The expressions of Taishu Hong, Imperial Ancestor Greenleaf, and Imperial Ancestor Shui Ying changed simultaneously. This figure was incomparably majestic and emitted a supreme and boundless might. Numerous forbidden order energy lingered around his body, making him seem like the incarnation of the heavenly Tao. In the blink of an eye, this figure appeared out of thin air and appeared not far away from Taishu Hong and the others. Even if the distance was extremely close, with the cultivation of Taishu Hong and the others, they actually couldn't see the appearance of this figure clearly. He was too dazzling, like a great sun shining alone, with an aura of supremacy in the heavens and earth. Just looking at his figure made one feel suffocated, as if they'd seen a god. Without a doubt, this figure was the newly arrived Emperor Nameless. Taishu Hong and the others all looked extremely solemn, as if they were facing a great enemy. The figure with his hands behind his back glanced at the black-yellow Tao tablet not far away, then looked at Taishu Hong and the others. He said indifferently, "I've come this time to regain control of the forbidden order in the heavens, and I've come to take revenge." His voice was faint and indistinct, revealing a sense of superiority and overlooking all living beings. Taking a deep breath, Taishu Hong said, "My black-yellow Tao court has always maintained neutrality since ancient times. It has been so in the past, and it will be so in the future. I just don't know why fellow Taoist has come here?" "You call me fellow Taoist?" The figure's voice didn't conceal the disdain in his heart. "Remember, in this starry ancient path, I am the supreme ruler. You can call me Emperor Shi Tian. On the other side of the starry sky, the great Tao is like the heavens, and I'm the emperor, so I'm called Emperor Shi Tian. The expressions of Tai Shu Hong and the others changed constantly. The Emperor Nameless, who called himself Emperor Shi Tian, had shown a kind of superior attitude since he appeared, which made them feel extremely uncomfortable. "I've come here for only one thing." Emperor Shi Tian's voice was indifferent. "From today onwards, everyone in the Black-Yellow Dao Court must obey my orders. If anyone disobeys, then there's no need for the Black-Yellow Dao Court to exist anymore." His voice was very direct. This wasn't a discussion, but an order. Tai Shu Hong was furious, and his face was livid. He was just about to say something when he was stopped by Emperor Ancestor Greenleaf. "Emperor Shi Tian, my Black-Yellow Dao Court has never fought against the Forbidden Order, and has never been involved in the disputes of the world. Why do you want to force us?" Emperor Ancestor Greenleaf's voice was deep. Emperor Shi Tian thought for a moment and said, "Seeing that you still have some use, I'll tell you that in the future on this starry ancient path, no matter who it is, no matter what force it is, they must submit to me. In short, those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die." Buzz! The Black-Yellow Dao tablet emitted a strange fluctuation as it suddenly rose from the ground and fell into the palm of Emperor Ancestor Greenleaf. Emperor Ancestor Greenleaf exuded a terrifying aura, and his eyes were like lightning as he said coldly, "We just want to remain neutral, but you're forcing us. Do you really think that this starry ancient path can only be enslaved by you alone?" Emperor Shi Tian stared at the Black-Yellow Dao tablet for a moment, and then said, "This treasure may save your life, but it can't save the entire Black-Yellow Dao Court. If you don't believe me, you can give it a try." Emperor Ancestor Greenleaf's forehead was bursting with blue veins, and his heart seemed to be extremely conflicted and struggling. But in the end, he sighed dejectedly and said, "Sect Master, you make the decision." It was related to the life and death of the Black-Yellow Dao Court, and he dared not gamble. Tai Shu Hong was silent for a long time. In the end, he lowered his head bitterly. On this day, the Black-Yellow Dao Court, which had remained neutral since ancient times, submitted to the new nameless emperor, Emperor Shi Tian. As soon as the news came out, the world was shocked, and it set off a great earthquake. It was unknown how many great forces were disappointed. It should be known that since the end of the game of chess, among the 6 great courts, the Black-Yellow Dao Court, which had not suffered any damage, had long been recognized as the #1 court in all heavens. But on the first day of the arrival of the new nameless emperor, the neutral attitude of the Black-Yellow Dao Court, which had been maintained for countless years, was broken. How could people not be shocked? Emperor Shi Tian's arrival was aimed at the Black-Yellow Dao Court, which was clearly to establish his power, to announce to all heavens that there would be only one position on this starry ancient path in the future. That was his, Heavenly Emperor Shi's, attitude. When she heard the news, Ling Hongzhuang's heart was filled with indescribable disappointment. Not long ago, when Lin Sun was chased by all the great forces, she had tried to persuade Tai Shu Hong to let the Black-Yellow Dao Court protect Lin Sun. But Tai Shu Hong refused, just because the Black-Yellow Dao Court had always maintained a neutral attitude. Is the position that has been maintained for countless years necessarily right? In the end, isn't it still oppressed to have no choice but to bow down and surrender? At this moment, Ling Hongzhuang's heart was also full of disappointment. Neutral. In the face of absolute power, it had become an ironic attitude. Thanks to Novanda, W83127W, WJH6999, and other children's shoes for their gifts and support. Today is the last day of the double monthly vote. Goldfish, I have decided to continue to add chapters tonight. In addition, warm up a little. At the end of this month, the last 3 days will be continuous outbursts. At that time, if the outbursts are less than 4 times a day, it will be considered my loss. It is more likely to be 5 times a day. Chapter 2152. The submission of the Black-Yellow Taoist court made the title of Emperor Shi Tiandi spread at a terrifying speed and was known by countless cultivators. The previous Emperor Nameless, who was in charge of the Taboo Order, was extremely mysterious and didn't even have a title. He had presided over the starry ancient road for countless years and rarely appeared in public. Only some old antiques in some huge forces knew of his existence. But this time, Emperor Shi Tiandi was completely different. He was not afraid at all. He was overbearing and direct. On the first day of his arrival on the starry ancient road, he showed his absolute strength and means, shocking the heavens. Similarly, the submission of the black-yellow Taoist court also changed the situation of the world. Many great forces were in a panic and their hearts were heavy. Many people even complained about the battle emperor of Fangtsuan Mountain. The reason was that although the previous Emperor Nameless had been defeated, the root of the Taboo Order, the power of the Taboo Order, had not been eradicated. Now the arrival of Emperor Shi Tiandi made the starry ancient road fall into an unprecedented atmosphere. With such a comparison, many people subconsciously thought that if the previous Emperor Nameless was still here, how could there be such a big change? But no matter what, everyone realized that with the arrival of Emperor Shi Tiandi, the situation of the world had changed dramatically. Sure enough. On the second day after the black-yellow Taoist court bowed its head, the Heaven and Earth Taoist court in the Hongmeng world took the initiative to announce that they would submit to Emperor Shi Tiandi. Following that, the Tao courts such as Panwu, Chaos, and Multitude Demon also expressed their attitude to assist Emperor Shi Tiandi to maintain the order of the heavens in the starry sky. Then, the Heavenly Ghost, Taowu, Blood Kirin, Qiyang, Cheongqi, Blackwater, and many other ancient emperor clans also expressed their willingness to submit to Emperor Shi Tiandi. For a time, the entire Hongmeng world, and even the entire starry ancient road, were in a great commotion because of this heavy news. Emperor Shi Tiandi. This title seemed to have become the most supreme existence in the hearts of countless cultivators, and it was like a god that reigned supreme over the universe. Since the primeval times until now, when has something like this ever happened? They are all first-class orthodoxies in the world, but they are actually willing to be slaves to Emperor Shi Tiandi. Countless voices of grief and indignation sounded. The Taboo Order is like a shackle that blocks our path to the Tao. It should be our common enemy, but now even those Tao courts have bowed their heads. In the future, who among us can escape the fate of being enslaved? How I wish the War Emperor would come back. In this world, I'm afraid only the descendants of Mount Fangtsuan would dare to go against the Heavenly Emperor Shi, right? This is destined to be a time filled with humiliation. Unfortunately, we were born here, and we are destined to not be able to escape. Countless sighs, sorrowful, disappointed, and angry voices resounded throughout the starry sky. However, everyone knew that as long as Shi Tiandi was alive, the haze that shrouded the starry sky ancient path would never be dispelled. At the same time, the news of Heavenly Emperor Shi Tiandi descending upon the ancient path of the starry sky had also spread to the dark world. For a time, it caused an unknown amount of turmoil and disturbance. On the third day after Shi Tiandi regained control of the forbidden power of order, he issued his first order: order the whole world to arrest Lin Sun, the successor of Mind Mountain. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. If anyone dares to protect him, I'll annihilate their entire clan. The order was simple and direct, but it was filled with killing intent. The world was shaken. Everyone realized that this was revenge against Minuscule Mountain. Lin Sun is doomed. When they learned of this order, everyone's reaction was surprisingly consistent. In this world controlled by the Heavenly Emperor, no matter where Lin Sun escaped to, he would have no way to survive. He was bound to be the enemy of the whole world. However, when the whole world was in an uproar, Shi Tiandi seemed to have vanished without a trace, and no one knew where he had gone. In the dark night star area, on the boundary ship, in the courtyard, in the room, Lin Sun sat cross-legged in meditation. The amazing thing was that beside him there was another Lin Sun in cyan, who looked exactly like him, also meditating. Before long, Lin Sun in Cyan opened his eyes. His pupils reflected the strange phenomenon of all things withering and flourishing, and the cycle of life and death, which looked extremely terrifying. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun also opened his eyes. Their eyes met in the air, and suddenly a wonderful feeling emerged in their hearts. This feeling was exactly the same, without any difference. Interesting. Lin Sun and Lin Sun in Cyan smiled at the same time, and even their smiles were exactly the same. This Lin Sun in Cyan was the Greenwood Taoist body. Different from the past, the Greenwood Taoist body already had consciousness and cultivation, and could cultivate and fight alone. Of course, the consciousness of the Greenwood Taoist body was the consciousness of Lin Sun. Even if it was controlled independently by the Greenwood Taoist body, as long as Lin Sun thought about it, the consciousness of the doppelganger would be completely controlled by the Greenwood Taoist body. It was like a branch growing on a big tree, but this branch was still connected to the trunk. From today on, you will major in the Dharma scripture, the Green Lotus World method, and the sky patching technique. Lin Sun thought about it, condensed a variety of inherited powers in his body, and passed them to the Greenwood Taoist body through his consciousness. At the same time, Lin Sun handed the Great Way plate to the Greenwood Taoist body. This was a marvelous Kunlun Emperor weapon. Through the deduction power of this treasure, the Greenwood Taoist body could comprehend the Taoist scriptures and refine his cultivation with twice the result with half the effort. After doing all this, the Greenwood Taoist body turned into a green cloud and returned to the liver palace in Lin Sun's body. He began to cultivate cross-legged. Lin Sun showed a satisfied smile. This was the magical effect of the 5 virtues realm of the Great Way Golden Court scripture. Using one's own soul and Tao as the foundation, one could refine a doppelganger with real consciousness and cultivation. Although it was an independent existence from the original body, everything the doppelganger possessed would be controlled by the original body, whether it was practicing or comprehending the Great Way. Everything is difficult at the beginning. Now I have condensed the consciousness and cultivation of the Greenwood Taoist body, which means I have entered the threshold of the merciless realm. Next, I won't have to work so hard to condense other doppelgangers. Lin Sun calculated that it took him almost 3 months to condense the consciousness and cultivation of the Greenwood Taoist body. However, with the help of the Greenwood Taoist body to comprehend the Great Way, he could save nearly half of the time when condensing the consciousness and cultivation of the next doppelganger of the Great Way. With the combat power of my original body, I can already fight against 50% of the power of the injured Sword Emperor of Chaos. With the help of the Greenwood Taoist body, I will definitely be stronger. Lin Sun thought. During that period of time, she would often appear and spar with him. Although he was still abused, Lin Sun's combat power was improving significantly, and even his cultivation was improving step by step. Now he was only 1 step away from the consummation of the 2nd level of the Quasi-Emperor realm. A few days ago, Lin Sun had a practice with the Sword Emperor of Chaos, who was suppressed in the Tower of Endless Way, and clearly felt the change of his strength. It was no exaggeration to say that the current Quasi-Emperor realm, even the peak Quasi-Emperor realm, was no longer Lin Sun's concern. His eyes had long been set on fighting against the Emperor realm. Moreover, Lin Sun had a strong premonition. When he condensed more doppelgangers with consciousness, his cultivation speed would usher in a comprehensive explosion and improvement. A person's energy was limited. He had to temper his cultivation, comprehend the Great Way, study Taoist scriptures, and comprehend the Great Way. In addition, he also had to deal with and solve various problems on the road of cultivation. It was obvious how much effort and time was needed to take care of all of this. This was also an important reason why experts with higher cultivations needed to spend hundreds or even thousands of years every time they broke through to the next realm. However, if a person's cultivation was shared by 5 doppelgangers that were exactly the same as him, how could the cultivation speed be slow? While thinking, Lin Sun suddenly thought of Shi. A few days ago, the forbidden power of order covering the heavens underwent a shocking change and was recontrolled by the nameless Supreme Emperor. From that day on, she returned to the heaven-accessing place and stayed dormant. This also freed Lin Sun from the practice of being completely abused. However, without the extreme pressure of tempering, Lin Sun felt slightly uncomfortable, as if something was missing. It seems that you've already liked the feeling of being abused. Leaf, who was quietly hiding in Lin Sun's hair, suddenly said, "If you need, I can also be your opponent." Lin Sun said angrily, "I don't like to be abused. I'm just improving my strength." Leaf said, "That Star Destroyer hasn't appeared yet, but the new nameless Supreme Emperor has appeared. Lin Sun, you have to be careful." After saying that, he added, "Danger will come at any time." Lin Sun was shocked. These days, he traveled across the chaotic and turbulent Dark Night Star area on the border ship, so he knew nothing about what was happening outside. But he knew without thinking that the new nameless Supreme Emperor would definitely not let go of him, the successor of Mount Mind Heart. Moreover, his identity was not as simple as being the successor of Mount Mind Heart. His origin and the heaven-accessing place would also cause great trouble. Lin Sun looked to one side, where the sapling of the Bodhi tree was shining, flowing with cyan light like smoke. No matter how powerful the new nameless Supreme Emperor is, with this sapling of the Bodhi tree, he can at least avoid the detection of the forbidden power of order. Lin Sun muttered, "What I'm most worried about now is the woman named Star Destroyer." Speaking of this, he suddenly raised his head and looked out of the courtyard. At the same time, the door of the courtyard was knocked 3 times, and the voice of the middle-aged man from the hidden mist house sounded outside the courtyard. "Senior, in about a quarter of an hour, the border ship will sail into the starry vortex leading to the dark world. At that time, the border ship will encounter the impact caused by the violent vibration of time and space. I'm here to tell you not to worry about it." Lin Sun realized that after nearly 2 months, the border ship across the starry sky was about to reach the dark world. Thank you, Shuju 36009917 and Ungrateful Bow Rabbit, for their monthly tickets. Chapter 2153. In the starry sky, a huge whirlpool black hole appeared. When it rotated slowly, it made the starry sky feel distorted. Around the whirlpool black hole, colorful and magnificent light of time and space fluttered, which was so beautiful that it made people tremble. Compared with the huge whirlpool black hole, the boundary ship of the hidden mist house was as small and inconspicuous as a grain of sand. When they saw the light of time and space fluttering like rain, all the practitioners on the boundary ship gasped. Time, it was one of the most supreme and terrifying power of order. Even those in the Emperor realm couldn't resist the erosion of time. This kind of law of order was even more terrible than the forbidden power of order. Since ancient times, almost no one had been able to understand the mystery of time on this starry sky ancient road. Time is like a knife. It can kill the ancestors and all living beings. It is as terrible as the great way of destiny. Seeing this scene, Yi couldn't help murmuring. Lin Sun's expression remained unchanged, but a strange emotion arose in his heart. The innate ability of his origin spirit meridian was related to time, and could stop time for an instant. With the improvement of his cultivation, Lin Sun was more and more aware of the horror of the forbidden passing, which was absolutely against the natural order. In the shocked and awe-inspiring eyes of the crowd, the boundary ship slowly sailed into the huge whirlpool black hole. At this moment, the boundary ship seemed to fall into the turbulence of time, producing violent vibrations and roars, which made all the practitioners tremble. Even though the attendants of the hidden mist house had already warned them not to worry, they were still horrified when they saw such a horrible scene. At this moment, There was a burst of heat in front of Lin Sun's chest. The spiritual vein which had been silent for a long time seemed to wake up, producing a strange and obscure heat flow. Whoosh! Suddenly, as if being pulled, a ray of magnificent dreamy light of time flew over and disappeared into Lin Sun's body before anyone noticed it. Lin Sun only felt a wisp of terrible power drilling into his heart. His eyes darkened and he almost fainted. Such a shocking change also caught him off guard, and he didn't even have time to react. Boom! The place where the heart vein was located was like a silent volcano erupting, making Lin Sun's body instantly turn red, as if he was about to bleed. The boundless pain was like thousands of swords stabbing his heart, which made Lin Sun couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. "Lin Sun, what's wrong with you?" He noticed that something was wrong. "I'm fine." Lin Sun almost gritted his teeth to squeeze out these two words. His origin spirit meridian was born on his heart meridian. At this moment, a wisp of the laws of time was colliding with it, as if it wanted to corrode and occupy his origin spirit meridian. Even with Lin Sun's current cultivation, he was helpless and didn't know how to deal with it. He could only endure it. A full quarter of an hour later, the wisp of time energy that was rampaging in his heart meridian like a wild horse was slowly devoured by the strange power emitted by the origin spirit vein and disappeared. Lin Sun's face was pale and his clothes were soaked in cold sweat. He was as wet as if he had just been fished out of the water. He panted heavily, his heart still pounding with fear. The scenes from before were simply like a struggle between life and death. It was too sudden and too terrifying. "Are you sure?" Leaf asked. "It's really fine this time." Lin Sun exhaled a long breath of turbid air and calmed his mind. A wisp of the law of time had actually entered his origin spirit vein. Was this sudden change a blessing or a curse? The origin spirit vein was glittering like a piece of pure and flawless white jade, flowing with bright and illusory light, which looked extremely mysterious. The power of forbidden passing was contained in it. When Lin Sun carefully perceived it, he noticed the difference at the first time. On the smooth surface of the origin spirit vein, there was a trace of almost invisible texture. This texture was like the trace of the Great Way and also like the natural bone vein. If one didn't carefully perceive it, he couldn't notice it at all. When seeing this scene, Lin Sun's heart beat fiercely at this moment, and a thought came to his mind uncontrollably. Was this the wisp of the law of time? If so, didn't it mean that he had the opportunity to touch and comprehend the mystery of time? At the thought of this, Lin Sun's eyes lit up, and he felt that the pain he had suffered before was nothing at all. It should be known that time was regarded as the supreme and untouchable power of order. Even the Emperor Realm could only look at it and sigh, unable to touch it. If those old antiques in this world knew that there was such a seemingly insignificant wisp of the law of time hidden in his body, they would fight for it crazily. However, when Lin Sun calmed down and tried to sense it, he was surprised to find that the wisp of the Great Way, which was suspected to be the law of time, could not be perceived at all. Lin Sun was stunned, and his expression was uncertain. He was almost sure that this wisp of the Great Way, which was related to time, was not something he could touch now. Of course, even so, Lin Sun was not depressed. After all, this meant that he already had the opportunity to comprehend and control the law of time, and he would be able to comprehend it sooner or later. Unlike other people in this world, it was impossible for them to even have such an opportunity. The talent of devouring abyss turns out to be so terrible. It was also at this time that Lin Sun deeply understood how extraordinary the origin spirit vein he owned was. If I have a chance in the future, I can go to that huge black hole again. Lin Sun couldn't help looking back at the way he came. Everywhere was vast and the scene was distorted. The boundary ship was moving in a tunnel, and the black hole had long been out of sight. But Lin Sun realized that if he encountered the terrible power like time and space light rain again in the future, it might be a supreme good fortune for him. After all, who could imagine that his origin spirit vein could absorb the law of time? Boom! Suddenly, the boundary ship shook for a while, and the next moment, as if it had lost its restraint, it suddenly got out of the great way of time. Everyone, we have arrived at the dark world. The voice of the vigorous middle-aged man sounded on the boundary ship, with a sense of relief and joy. It took them nearly 2 months to cross the unpredictable dark night star area, and they arrived smoothly without any danger. It could only be said that they were very lucky. On the boundary ship, all the passengers who were on tenterhooks all the way showed a relaxed smile. Lin Sun looked up. This was a quiet, vast starry sky. Billions of stars were dotted in it, turning into galaxies, nebulas, star jades, constellations. It was extremely spectacular, and in the depths of the extremely distant starry sky, there was a vast world floating there, like a huge eggshell upside down. The billowing chaotic air was filled with countless stars around it. The bright divine light and auspicious rain fell around the vast world like the tide of the starry sky. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, even Lin Sun couldn't believe that the dark world, regarded as the land of evil and the chaotic zone, which even the emperors were afraid of, was so spectacular. Everyone, many of you come to the dark world for the first time. Before we arrive at our destination, I have a word to tell you. The voice of the vigorous middle-aged man sounded. In the dark world, the biggest rule is that there are no rules. It is called the land of evil by the outside world, where the most ferocious evil spirits in the world gather. All kinds of evil things will happen there, and there is no lack of unparalleled ruthless people who are full of crimes and kill people like flies. There is only one way to survive there. Either you are strong enough or you are strong enough. There are 3 kinds of people you can't provoke there. The descendants of the Divine Sunshine Ancient Sect, the descendants of the Hidden Land Realm, and the descendants of the Bronze Sparrow Tower. Of course, if you don't believe it, you can try to provoke them. I believe that death will come to you soon. Before coming here, I think you all have some understanding of the dark world. I won't say any more nonsense. Before we leave, I wish you live longer. As the voice fell, some people looked solemn, and some were lost in thought. Some people were dissatisfied and said, "What do you mean by wish us live longer? Aren't you cursing us?" The vigorous middle-aged man said indifferently, "When you can really survive in the dark world, you will find how lucky it is to live longer." While talking, the vigorous middle-aged man waved his hand, raised the flag of the hidden mist house. Whoosh! The next moment, a huge flag slowly rose from the bow of the ship and fluttered in the wind. The 3 ancient characters of the hidden mist house were engraved on it, and each character emitted a frightening fluctuation of the Great Way. "Let's go to the dark world." The vigorous middle-aged man gave the order. Everyone was still wondering why they had to raise the flag when they were about to arrive at the dark world. Wasn't it unnecessary? But the next moment everyone understood. On the way of the realm ship, from time to time, an extremely fierce aura rushed out from the nearby stars like a beacon, emitting monstrous killing intent. One could vaguely see that there were groups of figures on the dense stars along the way. So it's the ship of the hidden mist house. What a pity, I thought a group of fat sheep had come. Alas, these days are getting harder and harder. If we don't rob and plunder cultivation resources, do we have to live like this every day? Along the way, discussions like this sounded from different places from time to time, causing everyone on the realm ship to feel horrified. It was as if they had entered a world full of murderous intent and countless villains. There would be unexpected killing at any time. It was also at this time that they understood why the vigorous middle-aged man hung up the flag. It was to deter the ferocious people lying in ambush along the way. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his heart. The dark world really deserved its reputation. They had just arrived, but there were so many ferocious outlaws along the way. It could be imagined that if they hadn't taken the realm ship of the hidden mist house, they would have encountered waves of robberies as soon as they arrived here. At that time, how many people could survive? Chapter 2154. The starry sky was vast. Along the way, the world ship of the hidden fog house was stared at by countless fierce eyes. The passengers on the ship felt uncomfortable. It was as if they had suddenly entered a dangerous mountain. Everywhere they looked was full of murderous intent. The lean middle-aged man seemed extremely calm. He said, "Don't worry, everyone. The people we've seen along the way can only beg for food in this starry sky. They are not powerful people. I'm not boasting. In this dark world, under normal circumstances, no one dares to provoke the hidden fog house." His words were filled with incomparable confidence. But before everyone could feel at ease, a scream suddenly came from the world ship. Someone is coming." The lean middle-aged man was startled and looked up. In the distant starry sky, a lone and slender figure walked over. She wore a purple robe and had purple hair. She carried a spear on her back, and her beautiful face was full of indifference and coldness. She was clearly alone, yet when she walked over, the nearby starry sky silently roiled. Countless stars trembled and were on the verge of collapse. Some of the ferocious people lying in ambush on the stars didn't have time to dodge. Their bodies silently exploded and turned into bloody fragments. Purple clothes, purple hair, and carrying a spear, as she walked over, she was like the ruler of slaughter. The starry sky trembled because of her. The flying world ship stopped abruptly and couldn't move forward anymore. It was as if it was grabbed by an invisible hand. On the world ship, the lean middle-aged man's face was pale. His whole body was soaked in cold sweat. An indescribable fear spread through his body like a cold current. Previously, he had said with certainty that no one in the dark world dared to provoke the hidden fog house. But in the blink of an eye, an unexpected great calamity struck. At this moment, the lean middle-aged man couldn't even speak. He didn't even dare to move a little. The other passengers on the ship were also terrified. They felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Who was this? How could she be so terrifying? The atmosphere was also extremely oppressive, making it difficult for people to breathe. In the distance, the woman in purple stood still. Her indifferent and emotionless eyes swept over the world ship. Everyone who was swept by her eyes shivered. It was as if they were being stared at by the eyes of the god of death. They were so shocked that their state of mind and will almost collapsed. "Evil creature, you finally appeared," the purple-clothed woman spoke. Her indifferent voice was still drifting in the air when she made her move. A slender, fair hand reached out and grabbed at the void. Boom! Around the realm ship, the void suddenly collapsed inward, like a crushed water ball. The terrible turbulence of the void splashed, producing an earth-shaking roar. Seeing that the realm ship was about to be crushed as well, a wisp of dazzling and dreamy order divine light swept over. In an instant, the collapsing and rumbling space suddenly stopped moving as if it had been shackled and frozen, and the terrifying chaotic flow of energy in the vicinity had strangely stopped as well. Then, they all dissipated and were annihilated. Only the realm ship that was in the violent turbulence was safe and sound. At the same time, a graceful and illusory figure walked out from the world ship and stood in the void. Strands of rules and order interweaved around his body, and a rain of light flowed like an immortal god. This person was naturally She. Whoosh! Lin Sun's tall figure rushed up and stood beside She. His handsome face was full of solemnity. He never imagined that this purple-clothed woman named Yan Xing would arrive so quickly. How did she find him? It turns out that someone is protecting you. In the distance, the purple-clothed woman, Yan Xing's eyes flashed with a strange and terrifying purple light. She stared at She and said indifferently, "It's just that you can't stop me." She waved his sleeve, and the realm ship of the hidden mist house was immediately moved away and disappeared from the star region. Then, she said, "Yezi, take him away." Leave this bitch to me. The word bitch showed Shi's disgust and disdain for Yan Xing. Okay. Yezi rushed out and agreed without hesitation. Her figure emitted a wisp of sword light that wrapped Lin Sun up and swept towards the dark world in the distance. You guys go after that evil creature. Yan Xing frowned but didn't make a move. She just gave an order. Shi's appearance made her smell a trace of danger. She didn't dare to be distracted at this time. Yes. Two figures appeared in the void. One was a man in a gray robe, and the other was an old man in a luxurious robe. Both of them exuded the terrifying aura of the Emperor realm. In the blink of an eye, the two chased after Yezi. She also frowned but didn't make a move to stop them. Now, it's just you and me. Yan Xing took off the spear on his back and casually held it in his hand. His demonic purple eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. How about it? Let's fight to the death? Okay. She stretched her graceful and slender figure and said seriously, I haven't fought with my full strength in a long time. If your performance disappoints me, I promise you that you will die a horrible death. The Star Scatterer sneered and said, Sure. Her figure flashed and she waved her spear. Boom. The starry sky instantly fell into chaos. Countless stars that were on the verge of collapse suddenly exploded. Turbulence spread in all directions like a tide. Fighting here is a bit restrictive. Do you dare to come and fight? Shi's figure fluttered. In the blink of an eye, she traversed the boundless starry sky. Why wouldn't I dare? Yan Xing took a step forward. With a bang, she broke through the restraints of the void and chased after Shi. Heavens, what kind of terrifying existence is that? At the very least, it should be a battle between emperors. Emperor realm? I think it should be ancestor realm. Didn't you see that when that woman appeared, the starry sky trembled and was awed by her power? Terrifying. Far away, the sturdy middle-aged man and the others on the realm ship, who had escaped with Shi's help, finally recovered from their shock and horror. Although Shi and Star Destroyer had already disappeared, their terrifying auras still lingered in this starry sky, causing one's soul to leave their body. Why are you talking about this? Let's go. The lean middle-aged man ordered. In the starry sky, Yi turned into an escape light and flashed, moving through the void. Yi, do you think anything will happen to Shi? Lin Sun was worried. She won't, Yi said without hesitation. Yi said without hesitation, although she lost some of her memories like me, I can feel that she must have been an extremely extraordinary existence in the past. Lin Sun sighed. Yes, she is really incredible. She guarded the heaven-accessing place like a gatekeeper. She had spent a long time on the ancient path of the starry sky. Every time she appeared, everything would be solved. Even in the ancient desolation realm, she never showed any fear when facing the forbidden power of order. She had forgotten who she was. She only knew that when she woke up, she was already in the heaven-accessing place. A long, long time ago, Xian Shangchen, the head of the Xian family, had entered the heaven-accessing place and passed through the 9 levels of Green Cloud Path. He even opened the door to heaven a little. Although he failed in the end, Xian Shangchen was now the head of the Xian family. He had an overwhelming power and was regarded as the most powerful sword emperor in the starry sky. And she had witnessed Xian Shangchen's growth. From this alone, it could be seen how extraordinary Shi's origin was. However, Shi's opponents this time were also unimaginably powerful. They came from the other side of the starry sky in primitive times and chased Lu Boya and Luo Qingxuan until they could only hide in the mortal world. Lin Sun couldn't help but worry about Shi. Lin Sun, they are catching up, he suddenly said. One is at the 4th level of the Emperor realm, and the other is at the 5th level of the Emperor realm. If it's 1-on-1, I have some confidence. If it's 1-on-2, I can only fight with my life. Lin Sun couldn't help but look back. In the starry sky behind him, 2 terrifying figures of the Emperor realm tore through the shackles of the void like blazing rainbows and chased after him at an astonishing speed. Lin Sun had seen these two people on Mount Tong of the Shinji Taoist sect. They were both Emperor Realm monsters who took orders from the Star Destroyer. However, Lin Sun didn't expect their cultivation to be so terrifying. Lin Sun, there's one more troublesome thing, he said. The star region where the Dark World is located is also covered with the forbidden power of order. If we can't get rid of the two people behind us quickly, I'm afraid we'll be targeted by the forbidden power of order. Lin Sun's pupils shrank. The Star Destroyer was already terrifying enough. If the forbidden power of order also sensed it, it would alarm the nameless new Supreme Emperor. The consequences would be unimaginable. For a moment, Lin Sun's heart was heavy. They hadn't even reached the Dark World, but a great calamity had already struck. This was something Lin Sun hadn't expected. Lin Sun, I'll stay and stop the two people. You go to the Dark World alone. Ye seem to have made a decision. If I can survive, I'll go find you. His voice was as calm as before. But the determination in his words made Lin Sun's face change suddenly. He refused without hesitation. You must listen to me this time. It's nothing more than killing two old dogs chasing after us. You don't have to risk your life at all. Last time, when Lin Sun was besieged by the ice-devouring Sword Emperor and others, he had risked his life to save them. That scene was still vivid in his mind. How could Lin Sun let such a thing happen again? He said softly, Lin Sun, I'm a sword spirit. I'm not afraid of death. Since ancient times, the existence of a spirit is to block death for its master. Although you're not my master, I can die for you once. What's the harm? Lin Sun said flatly, so what? Who the fuck says that a sword spirit must die like an idiot? Remember, even if you're at the end of your rope, we'll fight to the death together. He was stunned. Lin Sun's angry words gave him an unprecedented impact. He was silent for a long time. Suddenly, he smiled brightly and said, I suddenly remember that someone told me before. What is it? He took a deep breath and said, It's better to live and die together than to live alone. In this way, even if we die, we'll be happy. Lin Sun agreed with him and said, That's what a man should do. But, Chapter 2155. One instant. In the eyes of the ancient Buddhist practitioners, 1 instant was a thought, 20 thoughts were a moment, and 20 moments were a snap of the fingers. Jun Huan claimed that the Tao of a moment was the most outstanding swordsmanship, which was a description of the speed of her swordsmanship, which had reached an astonishing level. As for Lin Sun, his forbidden passing could make the order of time stagnate for a moment. For Emperor Realm practitioners, a moment was enough for them to do a lot of things. For example, deciding life and death. When Yi heard Lin Sun's words, he said subconsciously, If I have a chance, I can kill the old man at the 5th level of the Emperor Realm. But it's hard to kill the other old man at the same time. That's enough. Lin Sun's dark eyes were clear. Kill one first, and the other one will be easy, right? Yi couldn't help but wonder where Lin Sun's confidence came from. Yi, listen to me. You only need to listen to my moves. Lin Sun didn't explain the secret of the forbidden passing. It was hard to explain. After all, it involved the power of the law of time. No one would be able to explain the mysteries within. Okay. Yi agreed without hesitation. Now let's meet these two old dogs. Lin Sun and Yi stopped at the same time. The starry sky was vast, and the dark world was nowhere to be seen. It looked desolate and empty. Evil creature, why don't you run away? Boom! In the chaos of the void, 2 divine rainbows broke through the air and turned into the gray-robed man and the well-dressed old man. The gray-robed man was a terrifying existence at the 5th level of the Emperor Realm. He glanced at Lin Sun coldly, and then his eyes fell on the sword spirit Yi. In an instant, his eyes became hot. He remembered that not long ago, the ice-devouring sword emperor of the Qiankuan Taoism court was sent out for this mysterious sword spirit. Now that he saw it, he couldn't help but feel a strong desire for it. He's mine, the well-dressed old man suddenly said. His eyes were dark as he stared at Yi. Let's see who can get it. The gray-robed man didn't give in. As soon as they arrived, they regarded Yi as prey and directly ignored Lin Sun in their conversation. But Lin Sun sighed and said, "You two should not be unknown people, but you are willing to be dogs. If so, it's not a big deal. After all, it's your business whether to be dogs or not. But how stupid you are to come here to die." The gray-robed man and the well-dressed old man were both stunned. With their status, they could make the heavens tremble 3 times with a stomp of their feet. No matter where they went, they would definitely receive incomparable respect and adoration. Who would have thought that a junior would dare to call them 2 old dogs in front of them? Their faces instantly darkened. The remnants of minuscule mountain have already left, and the woman beside you has been restrained by Lord Star Scatterer. I believe it won't be long before she is killed. I'm really curious. Who gave you the courage to be so arrogant when death is at hand? The gray-robed man's voice was cold. Or do you think that this sword spirit can protect you and allow you to do whatever you want? This was not nonsense. It was a cautious gesture. After all, Lin Sun's identity was not simple. Who dared to forget how terrifying his senior brothers and sisters were? Who dared to forget how the ice-devouring sword emperor died? If it were other quasi-emperors, the gray-robed man wouldn't even bother to talk nonsense and would directly take action. But Lin Sun was different. "Old dog, you have scruples." Lin Sun laughed sarcastically. "Otherwise, why do you talk so much nonsense?" "That's true." Yi nodded. The gray-robed man looked at the well-dressed old man with a gloomy face. The next moment, the two took action at the same time, and their goal was surprisingly the same. Not Yi, but Lin Sun. This seemed incredible and even absurd, but those who really knew Lin Sun's past experience would understand that it was the wisest choice to do so. For them, Lin Sun, who seemed to be easily ignored like an ant, was actually not simple. In that game of chess, it was because of his appearance that a group of descendants of Mountain of Mind and Heart were drawn out, and because of the Buzhou Mountain in his hand, he helped the Dozhan Emperor defeat the nameless Supreme Emperor in one fell swoop, and by his side, he was accompanied by the Sword Spirit and the mysterious woman. How could he be an insignificant character? To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. For the gray-robed man and the old man, although Lin Sun was weak, if they could capture him, this hunt would be half a success. Boom! The starry sky trembled, and the nearby stars shook violently. If it were an ordinary quasi-emperor, they would have long been scared out of their wits, and could only sit and wait for death without any possibility of struggling. But Lin Sun was different. The moment the gray-robed man and the old man made their move, Yi, who had been waiting for a long time, received Lin Sun's order and rushed out at once. The gray-robed man and the old man didn't feel strange about this, nor did they care. It was just a sword spirit. How could it stop them from killing a quasi-emperor? It was also at this moment. A brilliant and magnificent light swept out from Lin Sun's body. Time froze at this moment. Everything between heaven and earth, including the stars in the sky, seemed to stop at this moment. It was also at this moment that a ray of sword chi slashed out. The sword chi contained all of Ye's power, and it illuminated the starry sky. Puff! By the time the gray-robed man reacted, the sword chi had already torn apart the defensive power around his body and split him into 2. The terrifying power of Sword Tao was released, and his spirit was crushed as easily as crushing dry weed. There was no scream, no struggle. An old monster at the 5th level of the Emperor realm was killed with a single strike. His body and spirit were completely destroyed. Everything happened in that moment of stagnation. The old man in the luxurious robe was so shocked that his scalp almost exploded. As if he had received a great shock, he quickly retreated far away. Even Yi was taken aback at this moment. If it was a head-on battle, It would be difficult for him to shake a 5th-level Emperor Realm cultivator with his current strength. But now, he had killed the gray-robed man with a single strike. It was hard for him to believe. It was also at this moment that he finally realized how shocking Lin Sun's so-called moment of opportunity was. How is this possible? The old man in the luxurious robe cried out in shock and anger. He couldn't imagine how such a strange and terrible thing could happen. It simply subverted all his knowledge. His heart trembled, his face was full of shock, and his hands and feet were cold. If he had died in a head-on battle, it would not have shocked him so much. What he was really afraid of was that he didn't see clearly how the gray-robed man died. And the unknown often meant fear. "Ye kill him," Lin Sun suddenly said. Whoosh. Yi was confident that he could defeat an opponent at the 4th level of the Emperor Realm. In the starry sky, the sword Qi rushed up ferociously. At this moment, Yi was like a peerless sword emperor, rampaging through the void. The old man's first reaction was to escape. The death of the gray-robed man gave him such a great shock that he had to worry that he would suddenly die. Whoosh. He seemed to be extremely crazy, and he ran desperately. Yi chased after him and didn't intend to let him go. Wu Quebec. At the same time, Lin Sun took out the insignificant bow. "I need your help." Okay. Wu Kei, who had been silent in the insignificant bow these years, showed his figure at the first time and turned into a gray-haired young man with a fierce aura. The next moment, Wu Kei pulled up the insignificant bow, took a deep breath, and a terrible wave of power spread from his body. The bow formed by the skeletons also produced the sound of wind and thunder, and the surging ferocious aura covered the entire starry sky. At this moment, Wu Kei was obviously different from before. He was like an arrow god, standing in the starry sky, exuding a fierce momentum that made the stars tremble. As he pulled the blood-red bowstring, the airflow in the nearby void seemed to be sucked out, and suddenly collapsed and roared. Lin Sun, standing on one side, felt a stabbing pain in his eyes, and his mind was shaken. Bang! When the arrow swept out, Lin Sun couldn't open his eyes. It was too gorgeous and dazzling, and the power it contained was too terrible and fierce. In the distance, Yi, who was chasing, stiffened all over and couldn't help looking back. He saw an illusory arrow, tearing the starry sky and bursting out at an exaggerated speed. Along the way, the stars exploded like paper paste. Bang! Farther away, the old man in luxurious clothes, who was fleeing, let out a shrill scream, and then his body was penetrated by the blazing arrow rainbow and burst into pieces. A scarlet rain of blood spread out. A completely straight rift that was over 100 kilometers long had appeared in this expanse of the starry sky. No matter if it was the stars or meteors in the vicinity of the rift, all of them were crushed into powder, causing dust to suffuse the air, and sharp howls still reverberated through the surroundings. And this was the destruction caused by Wu Kei's arrow. An arrow crossed the starry sky and killed a 4th-level Emperor Realm cultivator from tens of thousands of meters away. That shocking scene caused Yi to stare blankly. Lin Sun didn't expect Wu Kei to make a move, and when he saw Wu Kei make a move, he didn't expect that the arrow could produce much power. In his opinion, as long as the old man in luxurious clothes could be stopped from escaping, it was enough. But Wu Kei's performance completely subverted his psychological expectations. That earth-shattering arrow also made Lin Sun gasp involuntarily. His mind was filled with shock. He really didn't expect Wu Kei to become so ferocious after so many years of silence. It should be known that when Wu Kei was in Sunset Tang Valley, he was only able to kill quasi-emperors when he was heavily injured. But now he killed an emperor with a single arrow, and he killed an old man who had stepped into the 4th level of the Emperor Realm. The Tao of archery is to gather all the power of one's entire life into one arrow. The core profundity can be summed up in 4 words, and that is to kill with one shot. Chapter 2156. Wu Kei's attack was like an unexpected surprise. Have you recovered from your injury? Asked Lin Sun. It's impossible to recover so fast. Wu Kei's fierce aura had long been restrained. At this moment, he was like a wild boy with a bright smile. He touched his chin and thought for a moment. I've almost recovered to 30% of my peak strength. Lin Sun's eyes flickered. 30% of his strength killed a 4th-level Emperor realm with one arrow? How powerful was Wu Kei in his heyday? Lin Sun looked at Leaf, the sword spirit, who was rushing from afar, and thought of the terrifying figure that was still lurking in the depths of the Broken Sword Mountain. Lin Sun suddenly found that he seemed to be the weakest one, which was really a sad thing. Wu Kei suddenly said, "Young master, I might not be able to wake up for a long time, unless what?" asked Lin Sun. Wu Kei seemed to be embarrassed to say it. He coughed and said, "Well, little master, you know, I've refined a lot of treasures over the years to barely recover some of my strength." Before Wu Kei finished, Lin Sun understood and said, "Emperor treasures?" Wu Kei nodded and added, "The more the better." Lin Sun's lips twitched imperceptibly. He said, "Don't worry. I'll definitely collect more Emperor treasures in the future." Wu Kei seemed to be a little embarrassed. He said, "Little master, as you can see just now, although I swallowed some Emperor treasures, I also recovered some of my strength. For example, killing that old thing just now was as easy as blowing off dust." Leaf suddenly said, "The blow just now seems to have drained all your strength. It's not as easy as blowing off dust." Wu Kei's smile froze. He stared at Leaf faintly and said, "Little master, if you let me swallow this little sword spirit, my seriously damaged strength will be completely restored in less than a day." Leaf said calmly, "I'm different from you. I don't need to refine the essence of Emperor treasures to repair myself, and I'm sure that although you're a spirit like me, your cultivation at your peak can't be higher than mine." After a pause, he calmly said, "In comparison, your idea of devouring me is no different from a toad wanting to eat swan meat. You're dreaming and overestimating yourself." His words were so fierce and direct like his sword Dao, and it caused Wu Kei to be astounded. He said in surprise, "Little master, this little sword spirit is very sharp." Yezi corrected him, "I'm Yezi, not little sword spirit." Seeing that the two of them were at loggerheads with each other, Lin Sun hurriedly stopped them and pulled them apart. Otherwise, they would have to fight. "Little sword spirit, I might have a taste of you the next time we meet." Finally, Wu Kei smiled and said this. Then he returned to the insignificant bow and fell into silence again. "This guy," Yi thought about it and commented, "You're asking for a beating." The smell of gunpowder was intense. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing and said, "Let's go." He thought of Shi, and his heart sank again. The smile on his face faded. He took a deep breath and started to move. He first collected the spoils of war left behind on the battlefield, and then he teleported towards the distant starry sky. "Where are we going?" Yezi asked. "The Dark World," Lin Sun answered without thinking. "Aren't you worried about Shi?" Yezi couldn't help asking. "She will come to us," Lin Sun said in a low voice. "But in case, there is no in case." "I see." While talking, Lin Sun and Yezi had disappeared in the vast starry sky. Soon after they left, in the depths of the starry sky, a figure emerged and stood there quietly. His eyes reflected the changes of the heavens and the transformations of all things. He just stood there casually, like a supreme ruler of the starry sky. His lonely figure was independent of the world. "My lord." An extremely respectful and submissive voice suddenly sounded out, and then a tall and sturdy man whose entire body was suffused with black lightning appeared. His aura was incomparably terrifying. Just a single breath was enough to cause the entire starry sky to tremble. But at this time, he stood respectfully on the side of the lonely figure with his head bowed. The figure was a man of few words. Every word was like the sonorous voice of the Great Way reaching people's hearts. "Sure, Tiendi has appeared in the Dark World. The leaders of the divine Sunshine Ancient Sect and the Hidden Land Realm have all surrendered to him. The burly man's voice was deep and resounded like muffled thunder. I knew it would be like this. There was a hint of sarcasm in the figure's voice. The burly man hesitated for a moment and said, "My lord, Sher Tiendi sent a message through the Hidden Land Realm, asking you to pay a visit to him." Pay a visit? When this word came out of the figure's mouth, the starry sky suddenly dimmed, and countless stars rustled and shook. The burly man was stiff all over, and his forehead was covered with cold sweat. The figure was silent for a moment and sighed. He is just a dog on the other side of the starry sky. Does he really think he is the ruler of this starry sky? The burly man smiled bitterly in his heart. In this dark world, perhaps only his lord dared to call Sher Tiendi this. However, he knew his lord's character very well. One word: arrogant. Arrogant to the bone, and arrogant to the point of looking down on everyone else. In fact, not only in this dark world, but even on the starry sky ancient road, there were not many people who could enter the eyes of his lord. This kind of arrogance, or rather, unyielding character, was absolute conceit and absolute foundation. So far, the burly man still clearly remembered the words of his lord. The weight of the great way could not crush a proud character. The whole world was his enemy, and he did not lose a trace of his pride. In the burly man's view, in this world, in this ancient and modern time, no one could compare with his lord. He remembered that an imperial ancestor once visited and wanted to discuss the way with his lord. His lord only said, "The great way cannot be spoken, and the big words cannot be distinguished. You are just a small way, and you are not qualified to compete with me." This sentence made the imperial ancestor ashamed and angry, and he left in a huff. "Tell that old dog that I have gone to the other side of the starry sky," the figure suddenly said. The burly man was stunned and could not help but remind, "My lord, now the world knows that with the arrival of Sher Tiendi, the path to the other side of the starry sky has long been cut off." The figure said, "So what?" The burly man smiled bitterly. What kind of person was Sher Tiendi? How could he not see through such a clumsy refusal? "Go. When the time comes, I will go and have a chat with this old dog." The figure waved his hand. The burly man nodded and left. The figure looked in the direction of Lin Sun's departure again, and he murmured in his heart, "Master has given you the supreme fortune that he left in the Kunlun ruins. I'd like to see how much of a storm you can cause in this dark world." After a long time, his figure gradually dissipated silently. The dark world. Since ancient times, it had the titles of Land of Evil and Zone of Turmoil. For countless years, countless evil demons had wandered here. There were no rules here. If you wanted to survive, you had to be strong enough or strong enough. There were many legends about the dark world, but almost all of them were related to evil, killing, blood, and turmoil. The territory of the dark world was extremely vast, and it was divided into 33 realms. The vastness of the territory was comparable to the 49 provinces of the primordial world. Great Apothecary City. Located in the Cold Sky Territory, one of the 33 territories of the Dark World, there were countless cities like this one in the Cold Sky Territory. Great Apothecary City was very dilapidated. Some of the city walls had collapsed, and there were pitifully few buildings in the city. This was normal. In the Dark World, order had collapsed. Countless bloody killings took place every day, and the aftermath of the battle was enough to make any city unable to survive for long. Great Apothecary City looked dilapidated, but it was not easy for it to survive until now. Unlike the outside world, an ordinary city like Great Apothecary City could not be occupied by any force for a long time. Just last year, Great Apothecary City had a new city lord. The previous city lord was killed by the current city lord, Taoist Crocodile. If one looked back 1,000 years, Great Apothecary City had successively changed 149 city lords, and every city lord had died a violent death. This kind of situation was not uncommon in the dark world. In the dark world, occupying a city could attract countless experts to join and form a force, so that they could survive better in this bloody and turbulent dark world. Yes, everything was for survival. After all, a person's strength was too weak. Only with his own force could he live longer in the dark world. In the evening, Lin Sun appeared outside Great Apothecary City. The night was coming. Outside Great Apothecary City, there were only a few figures going in and out. Taoism Pier, you look unfamiliar. What can I do for you? A dark-skinned, thin and vigorous young man in black came up and took the initiative to greet Lin Sun. What can you help me with? Lin Sun glanced at him. The young man in black smiled. As long as the price is high enough, I can even risk my life. Lin Sun said, I'm new here. What do you think I should do if I want to live longer here? I want to hear something useful. As he said, he threw a storage bag to the young man. Opening the storage bag, the young man in black smiled more enthusiastically. Taoism Pier, I can only say that you have found the right person. It's not terrible to be a newcomer. What's terrible is to lose your life before you figure out anything. I can see that you are a smart man. Lin Sun glanced at him and said, I hope you'd better be smart. The young man in black felt a chill in his heart, but he said with a smile, Taoism Pier, don't worry. I won't do stupid things when I can make money peacefully. The black-clothed young man looked around and said, This place outside the city is the most dangerous place, so it's not convenient to talk. Please follow me, fellow Taoists. As he said, he walked towards Great Apothecary City in the distance. Lin Sun followed him with his hands behind his back. Chapter 2157. The young man in black was called Mu Chuan, a seventh retribution immortal king. In the ancient Desolation realm, a king who set foot on the path of immortality was already an influential figure who could dominate a region. However, in this nightmare city, Mu Chuan was obviously a minor character. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone out of the city to solicit business. Two guards stood outside the dilapidated city gate. Their eyes and expressions did not conceal the fierceness in them at all. Yo, there's another deal? One of the guards seemed to be very familiar with Mu Chuan and teased him with a smile. The other guard looked at Lin Sun and said in a stiff tone, 3,000 gems. Mu Chuan explained in a low voice, My fellow practitioner, this is the fee a newcomer has to pay when entering the city for the first time. With this, he can get an identity nameplate and go in and out of Nightmare City at will. Lin Sun said oh and threw a storage pouch to them. This time, Mu Chuan and the two guards were stunned. They didn't expect Lin Sun to take out such a huge sum of money so easily. Is there a problem? Lin Sun asked. Mu Chuan smiled, no problem. Take it. A guard handed a bronze nameplate to Lin Sun. The nameplate was engraved with a heavenly crocodile totem, which was very easy to recognize. But in Lin Sun's eyes, this nameplate was so crude that he could make it easily. However, Lin Sun didn't say anything. He was new here, so he wouldn't make a big fuss over 3,000 gems. My fellow practitioner, please. Mu Chuan led Lin Sun into the city. A guard stroked his chin and said, Mu Chuan seems to have caught a big fat sheep. The other guard said in a low voice, No ordinary person can come to the dark world. We are just guards of the city gate. It's better not to think about other things. It's not easy to stay alive. The city was also in ruins. Some collapsed buildings were covered with weed. There were many pedestrians on the street. Signs of restaurants and teahouses could be seen everywhere. It was no different from the outside world. Along the way, Mu Chuan quickly sent a voice transmission. The current city governor of Great Nightmare City is Taoist Crocodile. He's a ruthless fellow with a cultivation base at the peak of the eminent saint stage. He's considered a powerful figure in the Cold Sky territory. Lin Sun listened quietly and didn't care too much. Not to mention the peerless great sage. Even the peerless Holy King and the peerless Quasi-Emperor couldn't enter Lin Sun's eyes. Seeing that Lin Sun was not interested in this, Mu Chuan rolled his eyes and said, "My fellow Taoist, may I ask why you have come to Daming City?" Lin Sun said casually, "Waiting for someone." Mu Chuan was startled, but he did not ask any further. Instead, he said, "If you want to stay in the city, you will have to pay 1,000 Dao crystals to the city lord's mansion every day. Of course, fellow Taoists can also choose to serve the city governor's estate. For example, be a guard under the command of the city governor's estate, excavate ore veins, gather spirit materials. In short, so long as you help the city governor's estate, then you can continue living in the city." Lin Sun was surprised. "There are so many things to pay attention to if you want to live in the city?" Mu Chuan sighed. "Only by living in the city can you receive the protection of the city lord's mansion. You don't have to worry about anything happening to you. If you're killed outside the city, no one will collect your corpse." Lin Sun suddenly understood. In the final analysis, it was all about survival. Not only in Daming City, but also in other cities in the Cold Sky territory. If you want to survive, you must pay the corresponding price. Mu Chuan said, "This is the law of survival in the dark world." While they were talking, a scream suddenly came from the street ahead, followed by a burst of laughter. Lin Sun frowned. In an instant, he saw clearly with his spiritual awareness that on the street ahead, a man in a luxurious robe was waving a silver whip and lashing a woman. The woman was naked and her hair was disheveled. She curled up on the ground and screamed. Her fair and graceful body was covered with bloody whip marks. The man in the luxurious robe had a violent and cruel look in his eyes. When he waved the whip, divine light flowed, fierce and fierce. While lashing the woman, he said coldly, "Bitch, are you going to obey me or not? Just do it. It's a great blessing to be the concubine of the young governor." That's right. There were many onlookers nearby who joined in the uproar. There was only excitement, mockery, cruelty, and indifference on their faces. There was no trace of pity. The woman was already on the verge of death, her entire body dripping with blood. Mu Chuan said calmly, "Look, my fellow practitioner. That's the adopted son of the young governor, Taoist Crocodile. His name is Dong Jinrong. He's a playboy, but he has a bad temper." Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, but he didn't say anything. Mu Chuan reminded, "My fellow practitioner, you've just arrived here. Remember, don't meddle in other people's business. That woman looks pitiful, but you have to remember that this is the dark world. Guards, take this bitch back and lock her up. Sooner or later, I'll train her to be obedient and make her submit to me," young Governor Dong Jinrong ordered. Immediately, several guards rushed out and carried the heavily injured woman away. At the same time, Lin Sun, who had been silent all this time, asked, "Isn't it said that everyone who enters the city will be protected by the governor's mansion? In a situation like this, no one cares?" Mu Chuan's expression was strange. "My fellow practitioner, that is the young governor. The rules of the city are not decided by his father." Lin Sun suddenly recalled the words of the middle-aged man from the hidden mist house. The biggest rule of the dark world is that there are no rules. Whoever's strength is strong enough, their words are the rules. Before long, Mu Chuan brought Lin Sun to a dilapidated palace in the city. He said, "My fellow practitioner, you've just arrived here and it's getting late. Why don't you take a rest here for the time being? Tomorrow, I'll take you to the governor's mansion to register." "Register?" Lin Sun asked. "Yes. To live in the city, not only do you have to pay 1,000 crystals to the governor's mansion every day, you also have to pay a fee to rent a house. Of course, I suggest you work for the governor's mansion. That way, you can save a lot of money," Mu Chuan said and led Lin Sun into the palace. The palace was dilapidated and covered in dust. A bonfire burned, dispelling the gloom. A group of men and women, old and young, were sitting or standing. Each of them exuded a faintly discernible murderous aura. When Mu Chuan walked in with Lin Sun, they were immediately stared at. A skinny old man said in a hoarse voice, "Mu Chuan, you've only brought back one person for the whole day?" There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his voice. Mu Chuan's face suddenly turned pale. He stammered, "Uncle Huai, you should know that recently, there are fewer and fewer newcomers coming to the Great Lotus City. Business is not good." The skinny old man called Uncle Huai snorted coldly and fixed his gaze on Lin Sun. A strange expression appeared on his face as he said, "Mu Chuan, what kind of bewitchment did you feed this friend of yours? He actually fell into your trap so obediently?" The other people in the palace also laughed. They looked at Lin Sun with a playful gaze. Lin Sun looked indifferent, as if he didn't notice anything. He looked at Mu Chuan, who had walked away from him since entering the palace, and asked, "What's going on?" Someone couldn't help but laugh. "Haha, this guy still hasn't reacted. Could he be a fledgling who came to the dark world for the first time?" The others also laughed. Lin Sun still ignored them. He just looked at Mu Chuan. Mu Chuan felt uncomfortable all over. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed and said, "Idiot! How dare you ask me what's going on? This is the dark world. Which idiot would be like you, trusting others so easily?" Lin Sun said, "You're not smart at all." Mu Chuan sneered disdainfully. The skinny old man said, "Young man, it's your first time here. This old man will teach you how to survive in this dark world." He paused for a moment and said, "First, hand over all your treasures. This is called paying respect. Second, prove your worth. There's only one result for useless trash, death. This is the rule." A coquettish woman smiled and said, "Little brother, now it's up to your performance." The others all stared at Lin Sun with fierce eyes. The atmosphere also became tense. "So, this is the rule," Lin Sun sighed. His voice was calm, but every word he said was like a thunderclap that struck the hearts of the skinny old man and the others. Suddenly, everything turned black, blood spurted out from their mouths and noses, and they all fell to the ground. At this moment, all of them looked horrified and incredulous. Lin Sun didn't even make a move. He completely suppressed them with just a few words. How terrifying was his cultivation to be able to do this! Mu Chuan was the only one who wasn't injured. But when he saw this scene, he was completely stunned. How could he have imagined that the newbie he deceived outside the city was such a terrifying existence? "Senior, please spare my life." Plop. Mu Chuan directly knelt down and slapped his cheeks hard while begging, "I have eyes but failed to see. I was blinded by lard. Please be magnanimous and spare my lowly life." Lin Sun looked at him indifferently, neither happy nor sad, and said, "I told you, you're not smart." Bang! Mu Chuan's body trembled, and then he silently lay on the ground. His spirit had been shattered. Looking at Uncle Huai and the others, they thought they had caught a fat sheep and were fearless. But now they were all scared out of their wits. Lin Sun came to the campfire and sat down casually. He took out a green wine gourd and drank while saying, "I want to know something. If you cooperate obediently, I will spare your lives." Uncle Huai and the others nodded repeatedly, each more obedient and honest than the last. Their eyes were full of the desire to live. They didn't let Lin Sun down. No matter what Lin Sun asked, they would rush to answer. Of course, the questions Lin Sun asked were related to the dark world. They couldn't be said to be secrets or difficult problems. "Well, you've all done well." When the last question was asked, Lin Sun couldn't help but nod. Uncle Huai and the others were all refreshed. Someone couldn't help asking, "Senior, then, can we leave now?" "Okay, I'll send you on your way." Chapter 2158. Senior, are you kidding? Uncle Huai forced a smile. This is the dark world. Which idiot would trust others so easily like you? This was what Mu Chuan had said before, but Lin Sun said it now. "Let's go." Uncle Huai and the others rushed out of the hall. But halfway, their bodies turned into ashes and scattered in the air like decaying dead wood. This was the power of the way of life and death of Greenwood Taoist body. Next to the bonfire, the flames shone on Lin Sun's handsome face. He picked up the green wine gourd and drank. In the starry sky, he used the forbidden death technique and consumed a lot of physical strength. Now he was using the Greenwood Taoist body. I wonder when she will come to find me. After a while, Lin Sun sighed softly. The longer it took, the more worried he was about Xi's safety. If Lin Sun had the confidence to win, how could he not have heard from him until now? Uncle Huai, how's the harvest today? Suddenly, a sarcastic voice resounded from outside the hall. A man in a luxurious robe swaggered in with his hands behind his back. When he saw Lin Sun alone in the hall, he couldn't help but be startled. When he saw Mu Chuan lying dead on the ground, his face suddenly changed, and he turned around to leave. But right at this moment, a terrifying force pressed down on him, causing him to feel as if his body had been shackled, and he was unable to move a single finger. His face changed into a respectful expression. I am Jiling, a saint under the Castellan's mansion. I have no grievances with you. Please be merciful. Lin Sun didn't move and asked casually, What are you doing here? I want to hear the truth. The man in the luxurious robe, who called himself Jiling, said quickly, Today is the day to collect the Tao crystals. I came to find Uncle Huai and his men to collect the Tao crystals. Collect the Tao crystals? Jiling said quickly, Yes, Uncle Huai and his men are robbers. According to the rules, they have to pay 10,000 Tao crystals to the Castellan's mansion every 7 days. Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. Robbing was an unpardonable act of bandits, but now Uncle Huai and other bandits had to pay tribute to Castellan Mansion every once in a while. It seemed that Taoist Crocodile, the city lord of Great Nightmare City, was truly unscrupulous. To enter this city, not only did he have to pay the entrance fee, he also had to pay 1,000 Tao crystal a day to live in the city. If he wanted protection, he had to work hard for the city lord's mansion. Taoist Crocodile was truly enjoying his time as the city lord. Lin Sun said thoughtfully, No wonder everyone covets the position of Castellan. Whoever occupies a city will be in control of an endless source of wealth. Jiling smiled apologetically at the side and said, Fellow Taoist, you might not know this, but the city lord has to hand over at least 60% of his monthly income. The wealth that truly lands in his hands is not much. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and asked, To whom? Jiling said, One of the 10 domain masters of the domain of frigid sky, the domain master of Blackfin. When he spoke up to hear, he seemed to have realized something, and he couldn't help but say, Could it be that fellow Taoist has come to the world of darkness for the first time? Lin Sun didn't hide it and said, Yes. Jiling looked as if he had expected it. He behaved more and more respectfully. In the outside world, a strong dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. But in this dark world, the most frightening characters were like dragons crossing the river. As for the local snakes, most of them needed the protection of the strong, so they were not worth mentioning. Otherwise, they would never be willing to be exploited by the city lord's mansion. Uncle Huai and Mu Chuan were such characters. They seemed to be ferocious robbers, but if they wanted to stay in the city, they also needed to pay tribute to the city lord's mansion. Lin Sun said, Tell me about the Heikong region lord. At this time, Jiling seemed to be extremely enthusiastic. He almost told everything he knew in a very proper and humble manner. According to him, the Heikong region lord was a real emperor realm figure, and his forces controlled 109 cities. No matter who occupied these 109 cities, they needed to pay tribute to the Heikong region lord every month. Otherwise, they would be destroyed by the forces of the Heikong region lord. Among the 10 domain masters of the domain of frigid sky, the force of the Heikong region lord could only be ranked at the bottom. Although it wasn't the strongest, ordinary people couldn't provoke it. After knowing this, Lin Sun couldn't help asking, Why doesn't the Heikong region lord appoint the lord of each city by himself? Jiling said, "You may not know this, but the dark world is extremely turbulent and chaotic. Order has collapsed. Countless bloody killings break out every day. Although the forces of the Heikong region lord are strong, it's impossible for him to control the order of every city. It's too much power. It's better to take advantage of others." Lin Sun finally understood. Next, Lin Sun asked some more questions. Jiling told him everything he knew. For example, the first domain master of the domain of frigid sky was a supreme elder of the divine sunshine ancient sect. The other 9 out of the 10 region lords had to rely on him for support. This made it easy for Lin Sun to speculate that although the domain of frigid sky was complicated, there was still the divine sunshine ancient sect above the 10 domain masters. In short, the divine sunshine ancient sect was the supreme emperor of the domain of frigid sky. There were 33 territories in the dark world. The power of the divine sunshine ancient sect was far more than just the domain of frigid sky. In fact, the forces of the 3 dark giants, the divine sunshine ancient sect, the hidden land realm, and the bronze sparrow tower, had already penetrated into every corner of the 33 territories. Lin Sun even thought that there were countless cities in the domain of frigid sky, and each city lord had to pay tribute to the domain master. The 10 domain masters of the domain of frigid sky definitely had to pay tribute to the divine sunshine ancient sect. The biggest beneficiary of such exploitation was naturally the divine sunshine ancient sect, and this was just the domain of frigid sky. Of course, the dark world was far more than that. The territory of this world was extremely vast. In addition to the 3 dark giants, there were also top forces such as the Star Demon Mountain and the Hidden Mist House. Jiling suddenly said, "Taoism Peer, if my guess is right, you are definitely not an ordinary person. If you want to get the position of a city lord, it should not be difficult. If you want to get such power, I can help you a little." Through the conversation, he had already realized that Lin Sun, a newcomer, was extremely unusual. Lin Sun said with a faint smile, "Don't tell me you want me to kill Taoist Crocodile of the Daming City?" Jiling hurriedly shook his head. "Taoist Crocodile is very powerful. It is said that he has a close relationship with some of the powerful generals under the command of the Heikong Domain Master. Now I still need to rely on Taoist Crocodile to survive, so I dare not have any evil thoughts." He changed the topic, however. "The position of the City Lord of Daming City is a hot potato, but it doesn't mean that I can't fight for the position of the City Lord of other cities." Lin Sun said flatly, "You don't have to test me anymore. I am not interested in these things. I will leave at any time." Jiling seemed a little disappointed and said, "Taoism Peer, I can tell at first glance that you are extraordinary. It is understandable that you look down on a city." Lin Sun ordered Jiling to leave. "Go back and tell Taoist Crocodile that I will not attack unless I am attacked." Jiling was relieved and agreed happily. He knew that it was not until now that he had really saved his life. Watching Jiling leave in a hurry, Lin Sun said to himself, "I hope you'd better be smart." Daming City. The night was as dark as ink. The city lord's mansion, which occupied an extremely vast area, was brightly lit. In one of the magnificent palaces, a group of beautiful dancers were dancing gracefully. Under the almost transparent gauze skirt, their snow-white and alluring bodies exuded incomparable temptation when they danced. Taoist Crocodile was lying on a soft couch in a lazy manner. He looked like a handsome man with long dark green hair and a pair of dark brown eyes occasionally flashing with divine light. In his embrace was a peerless beauty with a body that was white, tender, and smooth like sheep fat. Her red lips were lightly puckered, her starry eyes were misty, and her snow-white back that was exposed to the air was curvaceous in all the right places, causing her to be extremely charming. Taoist Crocodile's large hand gently caressed the beauty's soft and moist back. As he listened to the beauty's slightly panting breaths, a trace of burning desire was gradually ignited in the depths of his eyes. But at this moment Ji Ling came in a hurry. Taoist Crocodile frowned and said unhappily, "What are you doing here in the middle of the night?" Ji Ling said quickly, "My lord, an unfathomable dragon with unfathomable strength has come to our Daming City today." As he spoke, he told Taoist Crocodile the details of his meeting with Lin Sun. Hearing this, Taoist Crocodile's eyes flickered and he suddenly sat up from the soft couch. The stunning beauty in his arms suddenly fell to the ground and let out a scream. "Get out of here, all of you!" Crocodile scolded impatiently. The beauties who fell to the ground and the beauties who were dancing in the hall shivered and hurriedly left. Soon, only Taoist Crocodile and Ji Ling were left in the hall. Ji Ling sighed softly. "I planned to trick him into taking the position of the Lord of Flame Sin City. Who would have thought that he wouldn't be fooled?" The Lord of Flame Sin City was Taoist Crocodile's sworn enemy. Recently, because of a natural Taoist crystal lode, Taoist Crocodile and the Lord had a big fight. But in the end, Taoist Crocodile suffered a great loss and the crystal lode was taken away by the Lord of Flame Sin City. This was a sore point for Taoist Crocodile. Taoist Crocodile said, "You don't think that guy can defeat Meng Tufu, do you?" Meng Tufu was the nickname of the Lord of Flame Sin City. "I don't think so, but I'm sure he can do it." Ji Ling said, "City Lord, in my opinion, if we can rope that guy to our side, not to mention defeating Meng Tufu, it won't be difficult for us to swallow all of the nearby cities." "Is he really as powerful as you say?" Taoist Crocodile said in surprise. Ji Ling said confidently, "City Lord, my eyes will never misjudge a person. The rarest thing is that this fellow has just arrived in the dark world and doesn't belong to any camp. He isn't familiar with the dark world either. If we can get him to help us, how could our influence be limited to this tiny Great Lotus City?" Chapter 2159. According to what you said, this is really an opportunity. Taoist Crocodile pondered, "But I'm worried that what if we lead a wolf into the house? A dragon who could defeat Meng Tufu would be playing with fire if he couldn't control it well." Ji Ling said, "City Lord, don't worry. I can see that this guy is very ambitious. He's different from us. He's not interested in occupying cities and expanding his power. Even if we want to keep him here, I'm afraid it's impossible." Taoist Crocodile frowned and said, "In that case, what can you do to make him help us?" Ji Ling's gaze was deep as he said, "Tempt him with benefits and cater to his liking. A person like him must have some ulterior motives for coming to the dark world. However, with our ability, I'm afraid we're unable to help him. So, we can only tempt him with benefit." Taoist Crocodile couldn't help asking, "What should we do?" Ji Ling gritted his teeth and transmitted his voice to Taoist Crocodile. Taoist Crocodile's face suddenly darkened. "No. What if he covets money?" Ji Ling let out a long sigh. "Governor, how can we get a greater return if we don't pay enough? This is the only opportunity. It's up to you to decide whether to do it or not." Taoist Crocodile's expression was uncertain. After a long time, he took a deep breath and said, "Ji Ling, I can promise you this, but if there is any accident, I'll hold you responsible." Ji Ling nodded. The next morning. "You want to invite me to the governor's mansion?" Lin Sun looked at Ji Ling, who stood respectfully beside him, and showed a surprised expression. He didn't expect that this guy had the courage to take the initiative to come to him. Ji Ling said respectfully, "Taoist Peer, to tell you the truth, after I went back last night, I told Taoist Crocodile that if he could win over a master like you, he would definitely help him expand his power quickly. So Taoist Crocodile promised that no matter what your request was, he would do it as long as he could. He seemed to be extremely honest." "Oh," Lin Sun said, "so, you're here to persuade me?" Ji Ling shook his head. "I know my own capabilities. How could I invite a great Taoist like you with just a few words? This time, I only came to invite you to take a look at the treasury of the City Lord." Treasury? Even Lin Sun had to admit that although Ji Ling seemed to be a saint, He was extremely eloquent. After listening to Jiling's speech, Lin Sun couldn't help but be curious. Yes. Jiling spoke swiftly. To tell you the truth, according to my knowledge, even though the city governor is only a peerless great sage, in these past few years, he has gathered many good treasures in his treasure vault, and some are even ancient treasures that have been passed down for a long time. There's no proof just based on words alone. If fellow Taoist is interested, you'll know once you go take a look. Lin Sun was very clear that this was a condition that Jiling put forward in order to win him over. He asked, "Are there any emperor weapons in the treasury?" Jiling was stunned. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Fellow Taoist, if it's a saint artifact, it's easy to find. As for an emperor artifact, how can a city lord possibly get his hands on one?" Soon after, he said, however, although there are no monarch armaments in the city lord's treasury, there are some treasures of mysterious origins. Since we don't know their uses, they have always been kept in the treasury. Perhaps fellow Taoist will be able to use them. Lin agreed after thinking for a while. He had many treasures with him. Just the spoils of war he had plundered over the years were enough to support him until he became an emperor. However, he was also short of some treasures. For example, Kanwu tree and Kunwu tree of the four sacred woods, pure and turbid star soul sand, primordial chi water, and so on. Seeing that Lin Sun agreed, Jiling immediately showed a look of relief and joy. The City Lord's Mansion. For the practitioners in Daming City, the City Lord's Mansion was undoubtedly the most luxurious and the safest place. There were countless guards here, and it was heavily guarded. Jiling took Lin Sun along the winding path, passing through pavilions, and came to the forbidden area of the City Lord's Mansion. There were not only many strong guards here, but also a layer of great formation. After arriving here, Jiling explained enthusiastically, "Fellow Taoist, the treasure vault of the City Lord, Taoist Crocodile, is hidden underground." As he said, he took out a token and shook it gently. Boom! The void was tumbling and changing. Dense Taoist patterns and formation symbols were flowing, gradually condensing into an illusory door. Jiling took a deep breath and made a gesture of invitation. "Fellow Taoist, please." Lin Sun stood still and said, "There's an ambush here." Jiling's pupils suddenly shrank and he stopped his steps. He asked in surprise, "This is the City Lord's Mansion. Who dares to ambush here?" Lin Sun ignored him. Instead, he glanced at a place not far away and said indifferently, "Come out, don't force me to do it. I didn't expect that you could see through the illusory formation here." A cold voice sounded, and then the surrounding scene suddenly changed into an open space. Around Lin Sun and Jiling, many figures appeared. All of them were ferocious. The leader was the handsome Taoist crocodile in a silver robe. His dark brown pupils flashed with undisguised killing intent. Jiling's face changed greatly and he exclaimed, "City Lord, what do you mean?" Lin Sun looked at him indifferently. Taoist crocodile grinned, "Jiling, you've been with me for many years. You've always been resourceful and loyal. I used to regard you as my right-hand man, but you've been very dishonest recently." Jiling's face changed. "I don't understand." "You don't understand? It doesn't matter. I'll make you understand now," Taoist Crocodile said and clapped his hands. Suddenly, a young man in luxurious clothes walked out from afar with a cold smile on his face. He held a silver whip in his hand, and on the other end of the whip was a bloodied and injured body. As the young man in luxurious clothes strode forward, the delicate body was dragged forward, leaving a ghastly trail of blood on the ground. Lin soon recognized this young man. When he entered the city yesterday, this man was on the street, whipping the woman. He looked extremely violent and ferocious. According to Mu Chuan, this young man was Dong Jinrong, the adopted son of Taoist Crocodile. However, Lin Sun didn't expect to see him under such circumstances. Then he noticed that when he saw the delicate body dragged by Dong Jinrong, Jiling's face changed, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. Jiling, do you know this woman? Taoist Crocodile asked coldly. Jiling took a deep breath, and a gloomy expression appeared on his face. He gritted his teeth and said, Of course I know her. She's called Jean Dai. Last year, she came to Daming City. She's very beautiful and intelligent. What's more, she's very kind. In this dark world, people like her are very rare. His voice was low, as if he was recalling the past. I couldn't bear to see her being harmed by those bastards in the city, so I took her in and treated her like a daughter. I cultivated her with all my heart. I only hoped that if one day I'm gone, she could at least survive on her own in this bloody and turbulent dark world. Jiling took another deep breath, as if he was suppressing the surging emotions in his heart. But I still didn't expect that the disaster would come so quickly. His eyes suddenly looked at Dong Jinrong, and he didn't conceal his hatred at all. Governor, it's this bastard that you adopted who took advantage of my absence to forcefully abduct Jean Dai. He intended to take her as a tool to vent his lust, and he humiliated and tortured her in every possible way. When I found out about this, I still remembered the friendship between us and didn't kill this little bastard. I only begged you for mercy, hoping that you would come forward and return Jean Dai to me. His expression faintly became ferocious, but you refused me for this little bastard. At the end of his words, he couldn't control the anger in his heart, and he roared. Taoist Crocodile's expression was cold, and he said, A little bitch made you choose to betray me, and even led a wolf into the house to plot for my treasure house. Jiling, you really disappointed me. Jiling's expression was livid, and he gritted his teeth and said, It's all because of you. Taoist Crocodile suddenly laughed and said, Jiling, since things have come to this, I might as well tell you that my adopted son had the guts to abduct that little bitch Jean Dai because I ordered him to do so. Jiling felt as if he was struck by lightning, and he said angrily, What did you say? Taoist Crocodile laughed impudently. I said, All of this was ordered by me. Are you surprised? Why? Jiling was so angry that his whole body trembled, and his face was ferocious. Taoist Crocodile's voice was cold, and he said, Jiling, you are too smart, resourceful, and cunning. How can I not fear you? After a pause, he continued, Of course, I know that Jean Dai is very important to you, and I did this to test your loyalty. Jiling was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and he said, You used such a despicable method to test my loyalty? Taoist Crocodile sneered, But you can't deny that this method is really effective. Now everyone has seen that you, a capable subordinate who has followed me for many years, chose to betray me for a little bitch. How can you be loyal to me? Dong Jinrong said gloomily, Adoptive father, there is no need to talk nonsense with this traitor. Just kill such an ungrateful person. He shook the silver whip in his hand violently. Crack! With a loud bang, Jean Dai's bloody body was thrown into the air, and then exploded into pieces. Blood splashed like a waterfall. This bloody scene stimulated Jiling, who had been extremely angry for a long time, to break down and let out a hysterical cry. Jean Dai! His voice shook the world, full of grief and indignation. Lin Sun didn't speak, and he was as silent as a stone. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but frown slightly, but that was all. He already knew that this time he was used by Jiling, but it was not a big surprise. As early as when he agreed to come here, he had already considered this aspect. Of course, although being used was not enough to make Lin Sun angry, he couldn't have any pity for Jiling, who was in grief at this moment. He just felt a little disgusted. The woman named Jean Dai was already dead, but her body was still blown up. This method was not only cruel, but also heartless. Chapter 2160. Jiling, who was in grief, soon came to his senses. After all, he was an old man who had been in the dark world for many years. The first thing he did was to apologize to Lin Sun. Fellow Taoist, I thought the plan would go smoothly, but I didn't expect that old bastard Taoist crocodile to trick me. I will fight with my life on the line for fellow Taoist crocodile's survival. Lin Sun seemed indifferent. He just glanced at him and said indifferently, "You will pay the price." Ji Ling's expression froze. He gritted his teeth and looked at Taoist crocodile in the distance. "I admit defeat. If you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please. Can you let this fellow leave?" Taoist crocodile said with a fake smile, "Do you think it's possible?" The other people around also sneered. "Then I can only fight with my life." Ji Ling took a deep breath and looked at the bloody flesh of Golden Butterfly, murmuring, "It's good that she's dead. At least she doesn't have to suffer in the dark world anymore." Dong Jinrong shouted, "Ji Ling, don't be hypocritical. Everyone knows that you are cunning and have a glib tongue. No matter what you say now, you can't escape death." Taoist crocodile glanced at Lin Sun. "My friend, I can see that you have also been deceived and used by the traitor Ji Ling. Unfortunately, this time you can only die with Ji Ling." His voice was cold. He waved his hand. "Kill them!" Boom. The world was shaken. The strong people who surrounded Ji Ling took action without hesitation. Every one of them was ferocious and full of blood. These were the capable subordinates of Taoist crocodile. They had fought with him in the dark world for many years and experienced killing and bloodshed. In the eyes of ordinary practitioners, they were a group of fiends. Kill. How could Ji Ling be willing to die like this? His body was covered with terrible divine light. His blood and qi were boiling, and his power suddenly rose to the extreme. In his hand, a blood-red spear swept out and swept in the void. Boom! The unparalleled bloody light swept out like a raging sea. The few experts who rushed forward didn't have time to dodge and were drowned by the power of the bloody battle spear, turning into ashes. This old thing has actually broken through to the peak of the Great Saint Realm as well. He's really good at hiding. Taoist crocodile's eyes narrowed. Only now did he realize why Ji Ling dared to betray them. It turned out that Ji Ling's cultivation had broken through a long time ago. "Fellow Taoist, leave quickly. I'll open a path for you." On the battlefield, Ji Ling shouted out loudly as he slaughtered madly, and the might in his body shook the heavens and the earth. As he brandished the blood-colored spear, he easily killed his opponents one after another. Rumble! The nearby space was in disorder while the layer upon layer of restrictions that covered this area shook violently, and they seemed to be unable to endure the impact of such terrifying might. "You want to leave? No way." Dong Jinrong had already rushed to Lin Sun with a group of strong men, full of killing intent. However, their siege was nothing in Lin Sun's eyes, and there was no threat at all. This scene was like a group of ants baring their fangs and brandishing their claws at a divine dragon in the sky. It was really ridiculous. Lin Sun, who had been like a spectator, sighed at this moment. He suddenly realized one thing. Since entering the dark world, because of some concerns and because he didn't want to cause any trouble, it seemed that he was too low-key. While he was thinking, Dong Jinrong and the others had already rushed to him. However, Lin Sun still stood there without moving. His tall figure was like a lonely pine tree on the cliff shore, indifferent and out of the world. But when those attacks surged over like tidewater, they were still on the way when they seemed to have been restrained and oppressed by a shapeless force, and they exploded in unison amidst deafening explosions. Bang bang bang! Dazzling Tao arts, treasures that overflowed with multicolored flowing lights, and no matter what sort of attack it was like an illusory bubble that rustled and shattered into pieces. Lin Sun stood alone, motionless. The pupils of Dong Jinrong and others shrank at the same time. This unimaginable scene completely subverted all of their knowledge and imagination. After all, with their cultivation, how could they understand the means of a peerless quasi-emperor? So strong. Ji Ling, who was fighting hard in the distance, brightened his eyes. "No. In the distance, Taoist Crocodile's face suddenly changed, and an indescribable sense of danger surged in his heart. At this moment, Lin Sun moved. He just stretched out one hand and waved it casually in the void. Boom! Heaven and earth turned upside down, and the void exploded. In the field, all the figures burst into pieces as if they were slapped by the big hands of the gods. From a distance, it looked like a string of bloody firecrackers had been ignited, blooming groups of bloody fireworks, hot and scarlet, so beautiful that it made people's hearts tremble. In the field, except for Taoist Crocodile, all the others died on the spot, leaving only a thick mist of blood. In an instant, the field was full of blood, and this was just the power of Lin Sun's waving hand. Taoist Crocodile's face was pale, and his body was stiff with fear. His lips trembled, and he couldn't believe his eyes. Indescribable fear, like a landslide and a tsunami, impacted his state of mind, making him feel like his liver and gallbladder were torn apart. It was terrible. In the blink of an eye, they were all turned into ashes. In the distance, Ji Ling was also stunned, and his eyes were blank. He was fighting hard just now, but the opponents around him all died in an instant, turning into blood. He was so scared that he almost screamed at the moment of death. Even though he had long seen that Lin Sun was an extraordinary dragon crossing the river, he never expected that this dragon crossing the river would have such a terrifying ability. This was completely beyond his imagination. In the midst of the blood mist, Lin Sun, standing with his hands behind his back, said indifferently, "A wonderful internal fight ended in such a sloppy way. Don't you feel bored?" Taoist Crocodile trembled all over and fell to his knees. He said in a trembling voice, "I have eyes but failed to see. Please forgive me." He knocked his head on the ground, making a loud thud. Lin Sun glanced at him and said, "Do you think it's possible?" This was what Taoist Crocodile had said just now, but Lin Sun returned it at this time. Taoist Crocodile, who was kneeling on the ground, lowered his voice and said with a fierce look in his eyes, "Senior, you should forgive people when possible. No matter how unbearable I am still the governor of Great Nightmare City. Some of the generals under the command of Hei Kong Region Lord are close friends with me. If they know that I am dead, I am afraid it will be troublesome for you. How dare you threaten your senior when you are about to die? I will kill you first, you old bastard." Suddenly, Ji Ling rushed out and stabbed at Taoist Crocodile with his blood-red spear. Taoist Crocodile was just about to dodge, but he felt his body sink. He was firmly imprisoned by an invisible force and couldn't move at all. The next moment, the blood-red spear pierced through his head. Bang! Taoist Crocodile twitched and fell in a pool of blood. Ji Ling was stunned that Lin Sun could kill Taoist Crocodile so easily. He immediately dropped the spear in his hand and knelt on the ground. His face was full of gratitude as he loudly said, "Thank you, Senior, thank you for avenging my poor daughter. Even if I die now, I will have no regrets." At this time, there were only him and Lin Sun left in this bloody world. Lin Sun said with deep eyes, "Then why don't you die?" Ji Ling was stunned. He looked up at Lin Sun in the distance and said with a stiff face, "Senior, you are not joking, are you?" Lin Sun said indifferently, "Do you think I am joking?" Ji Ling's expression flickered, and he said bitterly, "Senior, are you blaming this lowly one for being used by this lowly one? This is indeed this lowly one's mistake, but this lowly one did not expect that old bastard Taoist Crocodile would do this." Lin Sun's eyes were cold. "You really didn't expect it?" Ji Ling suddenly had a bad premonition. Lin Sun said, "With your cultivation, it shouldn't be difficult to save Golden Butterfly from Dong Jinrong, but you didn't do it." Yesterday, Lin Sun saw with his own eyes that Dong Jinrong whipped Golden Butterfly, who was already wounded and dying, in the crowded street without any scruples. With the strength that Ji Ling displayed, if he had made a move at that time, he could have easily saved Jin Dai, but he did not do so. "You deceived me to come here today because you have already expected that Taoist Crocodile, who has been suspicious of you for a long time, would never tolerate you taking an outsider like me into his treasure house. In other words, because of my appearance, Taoist Crocodile became more and more suspicious of you and your motive of taking me to the treasure house. In this way, it is easy to explain why Taoist Crocodile ambushed here in advance. Before Lin Sun finished his words, Jiling's face turned pale, and he was sweating profusely. With a bleak expression, he said with difficulty, "What Senior said is correct. This is indeed what this junior expected to happen, but I also wanted to avenge my daughter, Jean Dai. Senior, you also saw that it was not enough that my daughter was tortured to death by them. In the end, she was also dismembered by them. It is simply outrageous." Lin Sun's eyes were cold. "I said that you have the ability to save her in advance, but you didn't do so. Her death is entirely caused by you." Jiling braced himself and said, "If it wasn't for revenge for my daughter, I wouldn't have the courage to use your power." "Because you didn't want to avenge your daughter at all." Lin Sun looked indifferent. "Once Taoist Crocodile dies, you will be the biggest beneficiary. At that time, the whole Daming City will be under your control." After a pause, he continued, "At that time, even if the subordinates of Heikong, who have a close relationship with Taoist Crocodile, know about this, you can put all the blame on me. Killing people with a borrowed knife is killing many birds with one stone. And I, an outsider, will be the scapegoat. Why not?" Jilin crawled on the ground, shivering all over and looking flustered. "Senior, I really don't have such a vicious idea. I can swear to God." "If God is unfair, what's the use of swearing?" Lin Sun sighed with emotion. He thought of the forbidden power of order that had been recontrolled in the whole world and the nameless Supreme Emperor. Chapter 2161. Get up. Looking at Jilin, who was almost paralyzed on the ground, Lin Sun stepped towards the void portal leading to the treasure house. Jilin was stunned for a long time. Only then did he realize that at least for the time being, he would not die. When he got up, he only felt sweat all over his body. His clothes had long been soaked, but he felt lucky to have survived a disaster. Watching Lin Sun's figure disappear into the portal, Jilin followed without hesitation. He dared not escape, or rather, he dared not make any more mistakes. However, he was still slightly dazed in his heart. Why did this young man that looked terrifying to the point it caused one's heart to tremble let him off just like that? Taoist Crocodile's treasure house was located in an extremely narrow secret realm. It was only a few 100 feet wide, but it was still a secret realm. The most attractive thing in the treasury was the pile of Tao crystals that were piled up like a small mountain. They shone brightly, and roughly estimated, there were at least 80 million of them. Compared with spiritual stones and spiritual marrow, Taoist crystals were undoubtedly more precious and could meet the needs of practitioners above the Saint realm. However, for Quasi-Emperor Jufu, Taoist crystals were of little use. But when he saw about 80 million Taoist crystals piled up, it was an eye-opener for Lin Sun. He had seen many peerless treasures since he started his cultivation, but this was the first time he had seen so many Taoist crystals. With a wave of his sleeve, Lin Sun put away the piles of Taoist crystals. Why didn't Taoist Crocodile put these treasures into the storage treasure, but piled them up here? Lin Sun asked casually. Standing respectfully in the distance, Jiling hurriedly said, "Senior, the dark world is too turbulent and there will be frequent killings. Taoist Crocodile is worried that he will bring all the treasures with him. In case of a disaster, the enemy will benefit. If it's placed in the treasury, even if he dies, it can be inherited by his adopted son or someone close to him. It won't be given to the enemy." Lin Sun nodded. In this secret realm, in addition to the huge number of Taoist crystals, there were many magic medicines and spiritual materials sealed in bronze boxes. For people of the Saint realm, these treasures were rare, but for Lin Sun, they were of little significance. Putting these things away, Lin Sun continued to look around and search. Senior, look here. Ji Ling had a fawning appearance as he arrived at the center of the secret realm, and then he lightly stomped his feet, causing the ground to tremble and suffuse out strands of a rain of light. After that, a bronze sword box that was mottled with rust broke through the ground and appeared. Lin Sun stepped forward and saw that the bronze sword box was extremely ancient and filled with the aura of time. The surface of the box was engraved with marvelous Taoist patterns, such as the sun, moon, mountains and rivers, flowers, birds, insects, fish, ancestors offering sacrifices, and the geography. It was just a sword case, but it made Lin Sun's state of mind as heavy as a mountain, vast and heavy. It was even to the extent that when one stared carefully at the Tao marking diagrams on the sword chest, one would sense a horrifying and obscure aura. This is a sword box that Taoist crocodile found on the former city lord after he killed him last year. Anyone who sees it will be amazed and extraordinary. Ji Ling said, but regretfully this sword box is empty. Empty? Lin Sun was stunned and raised his hand to open the sword case. Sure enough, it was completely empty. There was nothing inside. He picked up the sword case. It was cold and extremely heavy, as if he was holding up a holy mountain. He probed into it with his spiritual awareness, but he could only feel the kind of heart-palpitating, obscure aura. Looking at the bottom of the sword case, there was a mystical symbol engraved with ancient inscriptions. It was in the shape of a vertical pupil, making one feel uncomfortable all over. It was very strange. Leaf, who was dormant in Lin Sun's hair, suddenly said, "Let me have a try." Whoosh! Silently, Leaf rushed into the sword case. Before long, his voice came out, "Lin Sun, close the sword case." Lin Sun suddenly realized that Leaf should have found something. He closed the sword case and intended to put it into the Tower of Endless End. Unexpectedly, the sword case produced an invisible wave and couldn't be put into it. Lin Sun's eyes were full of surprise. Over the years, the Tower of Endless End had suppressed many Emperor weapons. Even Sword Emperor of Chaos, such a terrifying figure, was trapped in it. But now, he couldn't put this mysterious sword case away, which made Lin Sun more and more aware that this thing was not simple. When Leaf comes out, maybe I can know some secrets of this sword case, Lin Sun thought. He continued to search, almost digging 3 feet into the ground of this secret realm, which was only dozens of meters in circumference. But he didn't find any more treasures. Thinking about it, Taoist Crocodile was just a great saint. It was not easy for him to accumulate 80 million Tao gems and so many magical materials. Without further delay, Lin Sun walked towards the outside of the treasure trove. Ji Ling hurriedly followed him. At this moment, he was really no different from a loyal henchman. The governor's mansion. That magnificent palace originally belonged to Taoist Crocodile, but now it was occupied by Lin Sun. Lin Sun sat there and said casually, "From today on, you are the governor of this city." Ji Ling was stunned. It was like a dream for him to survive. Now, Lin Sun wanted him to be the governor of Great Nightmare City, which was more unbelievable than a dream. Lin Sun said to himself, "I'm waiting for someone. At least before I leave, I don't want any more trouble. Do you understand?" Ji Ling was in a trance for a moment, and finally dared to believe that all this was true. He agreed without hesitation, "Senior, please rest assured. I will make up for my mistake by meritorious deeds. I won't let you down. A worthless person couldn't survive in the dark world." Ji Ling was cunning and cunning. If he was used well, he would be a rare talent. If he was not used well, he would be a poisonous snake that could kill people. For Lin Sun, this was Ji Ling's value and the reason why he spared him. As he said, he didn't plan to leave Great Nightmare City for the time being before she returned. Of course, when it was time to leave, Lin Sun would never stop. "My name is Daoyuan," Lin Sun said suddenly. It was inexplicable for him to announce his name at this time. But Jiling was just stunned, and then he showed a flattering smile like a blooming chrysanthemum and said, "Senior Daoyuan. The Great Way is like an abyss, broad and boundless. What a good name!" Jiling didn't know this was Lin Sun's Taoist name, and Lin Sun wouldn't explain. But Lin Sun was clear that from tomorrow onwards, all the practitioners in Great Nightmare City would know the name of Daoyuan. And as long as she came, he would definitely know who Daoyuan was in Great Nightmare City. The next morning, the news of Taoist Crocodile's death spread throughout Great Nightmare City, but it didn't cause too much of a stir because the governor had changed too frequently in these years. Taoist Crocodile won the position of governor last year, so it wasn't surprising that he was killed. However, some news still caused a lot of discussion. For example, the new governor was Jiling, a ruthless character who had followed Taoist Crocodile for many years and was known for his resourcefulness. In just one night, he firmly controlled the forces under Taoist Crocodile's command with an iron fist, and there wasn't any turmoil. For example, the one who killed Taoist Crocodile was a ruthless character named Daoyuan, who was now serving Jiling. This made the practitioners in the city more respectful and fearful of Jiling. In their opinion, Jiling recruited a ruthless character who could kill Taoist Crocodile, which showed how powerful Jiling was. Of course, only Jiling himself knew the real situation. He was just a puppet in front of the stage. In short, from this day onwards, Great Nightmare City had a new governor, and the name Daoyuan was already known by everyone in the city. Lin Sun didn't care about this. He was making the best use of his time to cultivate. She's life and death were unknown, and he hadn't returned yet, which made him realize how terrifying the purple-clothed woman, Star Yen, was. The forbidden power of order was under control again, and the new nameless Supreme Emperor had arrived. Lin Sun didn't need to think at all to know that if the other party knew that he was in the dark world, she would definitely come to find him immediately. This was also the reason why Lin Sun kept such a low profile after arriving in Great Nightmare City. He even deliberately concealed his aura. However, this low profile made him the target of others. Not only was he seen as a fat sheep, but he was also used by others to kill others, which led to a series of disturbances. This also made Lin Sun realize how dangerous and turbulent the dark world was. If one wanted to establish a foothold here, even if one didn't cause trouble, there would always be unexpected troubles and disasters that came knocking on one's door. In terms of cultivation, there is still a long way to go before I reach the peak of the third heaven of Quasi-Emperor Realm. Although she is not here for the time being, the Sword Emperor of Chaos is still here. I can continue to spar with him and train myself. Apart from this, I should focus on cultivating the Great Path clones. The more Great Path clones with consciousness and cultivation, the more beneficial it will be for my cultivation. In the governor's residence, Lin Sun meditated as he pondered. At this moment, he was using his original body. Only the transformation of the original body could cause the power of the Great Path clones to transform as well. In the end, his original body was the foundation of his cultivation. Suddenly, the bronze sword case that Lin Sun put aside trembled slightly. Lin Sun immediately stopped cultivating and opened the sword case. Swoosh! Ye's figure rushed out, his body flowing with a dreamy rain of sword chi. The brilliant sword will illuminated the whole room. Lin Sun keenly sensed at once that Ye's aura was stronger than before after only one day. Although this change was small, it could be said to be amazing. Could it be because of the sword case? As soon as this thought came to Lin Sun's mind, he heard Yi say, "Lin Sun, this sword case is not simple at all." There was a rare hint of joy in his voice. When not fighting, Ye's temperament had always been very calm and quiet. However, it was obvious that he had encountered something unexpected this time, which was why he was so excited. Chapter 2162. Yi couldn't hold back his joy and continued, "If I'm right, this sword case should be called Sword World. What is hidden in it is not a magic weapon, but a world for sword spirits to cultivate. This world is derived from the supreme law of Sword Tao. Every grass, every tree, every mountain and river is branded with the supreme essence of Sword Tao. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be moved and said, "It seems to be very similar to Sword Realm." Yi nodded repeatedly. Yes, Sword Realm is the embodiment of swordsman's cultivation, while Sword World is a real world. The two are similar, but the difference is that this sword world really exists. Speaking of this, he couldn't help sighing with emotion. To be able to refine a world of Sword Tao in a sword case, I'm afraid it's difficult for the ancestors of Sword Tao to do this. Lin Sun's pupils shrank. Even the ancestors of Sword Tao couldn't do this? This was undoubtedly incredible. Emperors may have the power to destroy a world, but it's very difficult to create a world. Do you know that those who can control such power are just like the Creator? Yi said. However, this sword world is very special. It seems to be specially created for sword spirit. Only sword spirits like me can enter it to cultivate and comprehend the law of Sword Tao in the world of Sword Tao. Lin Sun realized why this sword case had been sealed after falling into the hands of Taoist crocodile. It turned out that it wasn't something that cultivators could use at all. Cultivating in it can not only speed up my recovery, but also help me comprehend more mysterious laws of Sword Tao. Yi looked very excited. Lin Sun was also happy for him. Wu Kei had the insignificance bow, and the spirit of the broken blade had the broken blade, so they could rely on refining imperial weapons to restore their vitality. Only Yi lost his body and couldn't do this. Now, with this sword box that contained the Sunluo sword realm, it was as if Yi had a cave that he could cultivate in. He no longer had to hide in his hair like before. Yi was a little embarrassed and said, "Lin Sun, this sword case contains a world that can't be put away. You can only carry it in the future. It's not difficult. It's a piece of cake." Lin Sun laughed. From that day onwards, Yi entered the world of the sword scabbard to cultivate. In the following period of time, there would be a peerless, ruthless man who carried a sword case on his back in the dark world. A few days later, "Senior, this is bad." Jiling hurried over and stood outside the main hall to report. He called Lin Sun Senior more and more smoothly now. Even though he could see that Lin Sun was actually extremely young according to the skeletal age of a practitioner, it was natural for him to call Lin Sun Senior. On the path of cultivation, those who were strong were revered. What happened? In the hall, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. After hearing the news of Taoist crocodile's death, the city lord of Flame Sin City, Meng Tufu, who is 9,000 miles away from our great abyss city, came with his subordinates. Jiling's expression was calm and he did not panic. Meng Tufu was a ruthless character. He had once defeated Taoist crocodile, but in comparison, Jiling was more afraid of this ridiculously young senior Dao Yuan. There's no doubt that they want to annex Great Turtle City. Speaking of this, Jiling could not help but show a look of embarrassment and said, So I have to trouble you, senior." Lin Sun sighed. It had only been a few days of peace, and trouble came to him again. "Let's go." Lin Sun stood up and walked out of the main hall. Jiling's spirits were instantly aroused, and he shook his head like an old rooster as he followed up step by step in an extremely flattering manner. Outside the city, a group of figures stood in the void, emitting a murderous aura that made the world pale. The leader was a thin middle-aged man who looked like a scholar. He wore a Confucian robe and held a feather fan in his hand. If they did not see it with their own eyes, no one would have thought that this thin middle-aged man was the city lord of Flame Sin City, a peerless great sage with the title of Meng Tufu. Remember, we're here to sound out Jiling's background. Once something goes wrong, we'll leave immediately. Meng Tufu gently waved his feather fan and his eyes flickered. Someone said, "City Lord, Taoist crocodile's death must have something to do with that cunning Jiling. As for that bullsh *T Dao Yuan guy, It's obvious that Ji Ling is using him as a cover to fool people. Meng Tufu's eyes were cold and gloomy. If that's the case, let's take down Great Turtle City today. But to be careful, we'd better sound them out first. He's coming, someone said. In the sky above the empty city gate in the distance, a tall and outstanding figure appeared out of thin air, carrying a sword case on his back, elegant and refined. Behind him, Ji Ling followed like an old dog, looking extremely respectful. This scene made Meng Tufu's pupils shrink and his eyelids twitch violently. He suddenly realized that they seemed to have guessed wrong. Ji Ling, the city lord, was more like a cover. Ji Ling, our city lord has heard that you've become the city lord of Great Nightmare City, so he's here to congratulate you. A man said in a cold voice. In addition, we also want to see what kind of strong man Dao Yuan, who killed Taoist Crocodile, is. Ji Ling didn't pay attention to him at all. Instead, he lowered his head and said in a flattering voice, Senior, the guy in the middle is Meng Tufu. Although he looks like a scholar, he's actually cruel and his hands are stained with blood. That's how he got the title of Butcher. Such a scene caused a wave of surprise and bewilderment to arise in Meng Tufu's heart. Senior? Ha ha, Ji Ling, you old fox, what tricks are you playing now? How dare you call a young man senior? Are you shameless? One man laughed. Ji Ling also laughed. It was a pitiful laugh. He had an indescribable strange feeling in his heart. He couldn't wait for these fellows to dance more happily. When they were beaten to the ground, it would definitely be very satisfying. But Lin Sun didn't want to listen to them anymore. For him, time was precious, and it was not worthwhile to waste it on these people. Therefore, when Meng Tufu considered his words and was about to sound them out, Lin Sun took action. He stood in the void and waved his sleeves. Countless practitioners in the city, who were watching the situation, nervously felt a tingling in front of their eyes, as if they saw countless dazzling sword chi falling from the sky like a rainstorm. Puff, puff. Then, a muffled sound reverberated between heaven and earth. The scarlet blood, like dye, painted the void into a dazzling red. When people finally saw clearly, Meng Tufu and his companions had already disappeared outside the city. Only blood was flowing all over the ground. The world was silent, and the whole audience was trembling. With a wave of his sleeves, the sword chi was like rain, killing all the enemies. His unparalleled and proud demeanor almost made people suspect that he was a supreme sword god who came to the world with his sword. Clean up the battlefield. Lin Sun turned around and left. The opponents were too weak, and he felt no sense of achievement in his heart. There was only one feeling in his heart, boring. When Lin Sun's figure disappeared, Ji Ling was still in a daze, and his mind was trembling uncontrollably. What kind of horrible existence was this? A gust of cold wind, mixed with the pungent smell of blood, woke Ji Ling up from the shock. He took a deep breath, and his voice was like thunder as he shouted, "Come, clean up the spoils of war. The rest of you, follow me to kill our way to Flame Sin City." After the shock, Ji Ling felt an unprecedented excitement. With the death of Meng Tufu and his companions, the Flame Sin City that was so far away had become an ownerless place. Rumble! Not long after, Ji Ling impatiently led a group of people and charged towards Flame Sin City with a murderous aura, and they swept up a cloud of dust along the way. On this day, Meng Tufu and his companions were annihilated, and Flame Sin City fell. All the wealth that Meng Tufu had plundered over the years was wiped out. On this day, the name Sword Demon Dao Abyss spread like wildfire, and it flew to many nearby cities as if it had wings. For a time, it caused an uproar. With a flick of his sleeve, the sword filled the world. The battle of Sword Demon Dao Abyss was discussed by countless people, and even some vicious people that had been in the dark world for many years were extremely shocked in their hearts. It was also from this day onwards that numerous experts swarmed towards Daming City from all directions. For a time, this inconspicuous and shabby city actually glowed with a brand new vitality and became bustling. This was the influence of Lin Sun's battle. The dark world was too turbulent, and blood and slaughter occurred practically every day. For the sake of survival, most of the experts could only choose to stay in a city and obtain the protection of the city lord. Although they would be exploited layer by layer, it was relatively safer, and they could live longer in this turbulent world. Lin Sun's appearance and the terrifying combat strength he revealed caused Daming City to instantly become a refuge in the hearts of many cultivators, and they successively came to seek refuge. In regards to this, Jiling, the city lord on the surface, couldn't help but grin from ear to ear. Every time a cultivator sought refuge in the city, it was equivalent to gaining an endless source of wealth. How could he not be happy? He was an old man who was resourceful, and didn't lack strength. With his identity as the city lord to rectify the order and set the rules, Daming City seemed to show a scene of prosperity. Lin Sun didn't care about all this, and he couldn't be bothered to ask about it. He practically didn't leave his residence, and he was always cultivating. However, he still noticed that the wealth collected by the city lord's mansion was increasing ceaselessly, and it was like a rolling snowball that was getting bigger and bigger. Of course, most of this wealth entered Lin Sun's pocket in the end. This could only prove that the current Daming City had indeed become different from before, and Jiling, the city lord who was resourceful, had indeed performed very well. But everything had its pros and cons. Although the eye-catching performance of Daming City had attracted numerous experts to seek refuge, it had also caused the fear and dissatisfaction of many city lords in this vast area. Chapter 2163. However, due to the fact that Daming City was in the limelight and the deep fear of Sword Devil Tao Abyss, the city lords in the nearby territories chose to endure. Wait and see. After all, this was the dark world where the order had collapsed and the weak were prey to the strong, not the outside world. The more conspicuous a character was, the more likely it was to meet with an accident. Even though Grand Turtle City has been forcefully occupied by the Sword Devil Tao Abyss and Jiling, it's one of the many cities under the command of Domain Lord He Kong after all. Taoist Crocodile had an extremely good relationship with some of the capable subordinates under Domain Lord He Kong when he was alive. If these people don't recognize Sword Devil Tao Abyss and Jiling, the happier they are now, the more miserable they will be when they die. A city lord made such an inference. Let's wait and see. In half a month, it will be the time to pay tribute to Region Lord He Kong once a month. At that time, the generals under the command of Region Lord He Kong will definitely go to Daming City to help Region Lord He Kong collect the property. Maybe it will be the time when Sword Devil Tao Abyss will be in trouble. Someone sneered. Half a month. I can bear it a little longer. Unlike the outside world, although the dark world was vast and comparable to the Hong Meng world, it was like a place where the spiritual power was exhausted. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth was thin and gloomy. Most of the mountains and rivers were barren and unruly. Compared with the Hong Meng world, where the spiritual energy was extremely rich and famous mountains and blessed lands were everywhere, the dark world was like a barren land. In addition, the dark world was extremely turbulent and order collapsed. Ordinary small forces could not survive for too long. For example, Daming City had changed more than 100 city lords in just 1,000 years. Only some behemoths could survive in the dark world for a longer time. For example, the 3 giants of the dark world, each of them had an ancient foundation that could be compared with the 6 Tao courts and the 10 war clans. However, most forces in the dark world were showing signs of being in a precarious situation, and no one knew when they would be annihilated. Therefore, although Lin Sun's nickname, Sword Devil Tao Abyss, had become famous recently, it was very eye-catching. But for many old people who made a living in the dark world, there was also the danger of being destroyed at any time. Woo woo woo, wind and sand wreaked havoc between heaven and earth. Outside of Great Nightmare City, the mountains and rivers were vast and boundless. Baleful energy was rising everywhere, and the smell of blood that had accumulated for many years filled the air. Lin Sun sat alone on the city wall, holding a gourd to drink. This was already the 23rd day since he came to the Dark World, but she had yet to appear. What was the result of that battle? Lin Sun couldn't guess. Regardless of whether it was she or Star Yen, their strength had long since reached a world-shocking level. They could kill martial emperors like they were chickens. They were unimaginably powerful. Not even a martial emperor would be able to predict the battle between the two. "Senior, so you're here." From afar, Jiling flew over with a respectful expression. "What's up?" Lin Sun didn't look back. Perhaps because there were too many fights and turbulences, the Dark World was full of evil spirits and the environment was extremely bad. Especially outside the city, between the mountains and rivers, the evil spirits were rolling and thick like smoke. If one stayed there for a long time, his mind would be tainted, let alone cultivating. This reminded Lin Sun of what Mu Chuan once said. The Dark World was never a place of reproduction, but a training field. Here, life was like grass, and blood and killing would never stop. No one would be willing to come to the Dark World if they weren't forced into a corner. In fact, it was true that one could only rely on Taoist crystals to cultivate here. Whoever could control more Taoist crystals could become stronger and live longer. Jiling whispered, "In 3 days, the 2 generals under He Kong will come to collect the tribute." Lin Sun also knew that the forces under He Kong controlled 109 cities in the Cold Sky territory. Every month, the lords of these cities had to pay tribute to He Kong. The so-called tribute was 60% of the wealth collected by each city every month. Daming City was one of the many cities under He Kong's control. Now, although Taoist Crocodile was dead, Jiling was already the city lord. The tribute of Daming City naturally needed to be paid by Jiling. Then give it to them. Lin Sun didn't care. In this dark world, he didn't want to expand his territory. He didn't mind paying some price when he could avoid trouble. Jiling was stunned and said in a low voice, "Senior, our forces have now controlled 4 cities in the nearby territory. In addition to Daming City, there are Flame Sin City, Beidou City and Water Caltrip City. 7 small Taoist crystal mines and some other mineral veins containing various ores and divine materials have also been occupied by us. I have estimated that we can collect about 3 million Taoist crystals every day. In 1 month, we can collect 90 million Taoist crystals. Excluding all expenses, we can leave about 70 million Taoist crystals." Speaking of this, Jiling took a deep breath and said, "If we give 60% of the tribute to the He Kong region, it will be a large number." These days, Jiling was like a warmonger. He fought from north to south. First, he swallowed Meng Tufa's Flame Sin City, then he broke through Beidou City and Water Caltrip City. In fact, when they learned that Meng Tufa was killed, and that the situation was not good, the city lords of Beidou City and Water Caltrip City had already abandoned the cities with their wealth. This was also one of the reasons why Jiling could swallow up the territory so easily. However, Lin Sun still didn't expect that just by controlling 4 cities, the number of Tao gems collected in 1 day could reach an astonishing 3 million. 90 million Taoist crystals in 1 month. Lin Sun was shocked when he learned this number with his current vision and cultivation. However, after thinking for a moment, Lin Sun said calmly, "Well, do things according to the rules. Do we really have to pay 60% of the tribute?" Jiling was a little anxious. He earned 70 million Taoist crystals in 1 month, but he had to pay 60%, which was 42 million Taoist crystals. Who wouldn't feel pain? "Do you want to see me fight against Region Lord He Kong?" Lin Sun glanced at him. Jiling suddenly broke into a cold sweat and shook his head quickly. "How dare I? I promise to do as you say." Through this matter, Jiling suddenly felt confused in his heart. He couldn't understand this young man who called himself Dao Yuan. His strength was so terrible, but he seemed to have no ambition at all. If it were any other strong man with such terrible fighting power, he would have been busy expanding his power and earning more Taoist crystals in order to become stronger so that he could live longer in the dark world. But this Dao Yuan simply had a pure heart and few desires. He did not have the slightest bit of ambition. This was undoubtedly too strange. In the end, Jiling only thought of one possibility. That was, Lin Sun either had a bigger plan, or he didn't care about those Taoist crystals at all. No matter which possibility it was, the more Jiling thought about it, the more frightened he was, and the more he feared Lin Sun. He knew very well that the smartest thing he could do was to be a good city lord. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The 2 capable subordinates of Region Lord He Kong arrived just in time. One looked like a young man with a strong body, cold eyes like a knife, wearing a scarlet cloak. His name was Shan Yong, and the other was Xing Lianqi, wearing a brocade robe, short and fat like a ball. Both of them were in the 3rd stage of quasi-emperor realm. Jiling, who had been waiting outside Great Comet City for a long time, immediately revealed an incomparably warm and humble smile when he saw the 2 figures appear, and went forward to welcome them. "I, Jiling, pay my respects to the 2 lords. Pa." As soon as his voice fell, he was slapped away. His cheeks were red and swollen, his mouth and nose were bleeding, and he fell to the ground in a sorry state. Shan Yong's expression was cold, and his momentum was oppressive. "I heard that you killed Taoist crocodile?" Jiling climbed up, covering his red and swollen cheeks. His expression was gloomy. Never had he imagined that he would be slapped so rudely as soon as they met. Such a simple and crude method caused him to feel an unprecedented sense of humiliation. He took a deep breath, lowered his head, and said, "Lord, if you're here to avenge Taoist crocodile, you can do it now. If you're here to help Region Lord He Kong collect the tributes, please pay attention to propriety." A cold light flashed in Shan Yong's eyes. Just as he was about to make a move, he was stopped by Xing Lianqi. "He's just a small character, why are you so angry?" Xing Lianqi said with a smile, "What's more, Taoist crocodile is already dead. In this dark world, dead people have no value." After a pause, he said to Jiling, "Are the tributes ready?" Jiling nodded, "They're ready." The 4 cities of Nightmare, Flame Sin, Beidou, and Water Caltrop add up to a total of 42 million Dao crystals. Xing Lianqi praised, "I can see that you're a very resourceful person. However, this is far from enough." Jiling immediately understood and said, "I've also prepared some small gifts for the 2 lords. I'm waiting for the 2 lords to take a look." Xing Lianqi laughed and turned to Shan Yong. "Look, this guy is a smart person. He's much stronger than Taoist crocodile." Then, he smacked his lips and sighed, "It's just that, it's still not enough." Jiling was startled and forced a smile. "Lord, as the saying goes, a thin stream will flow for a long time. In the future, when I manage these 4 cities well, I'll definitely hand over more tribute. Of course, there will be benefits for the 2 of you." Shan Yong suddenly snorted, "Jiling, do you know that when we came here, we've already decided to get rid of you? You actually dare to bargain now? Do you believe that I'll kill you now?" An overwhelming killing intent spread out from Shan Yong's body, oppressing Jiling to the point that he felt suffocated, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. At the same time, Xing Lianqi said with a smile, "How about this, since you're smart, as long as you hand over 100 million Dao crystals this time, we won't pursue the matter of you killing Taoist crocodile. How about it? 100 million. Chapter 2164. Any ordinary spiritual material, when piled up into a mountain, would be so valuable that it would be tempting to any cultivator. The Dao crystal was not only an extremely expensive currency, but it was also a cultivation source suitable for cultivators above the sage realm. This also made the value of the Tao crystal far more valuable than ordinary spiritual stones and spiritual marrow. An ordinary sage realm cultivator who possessed millions of Tao crystal was already considered to be very valuable. Even if he was a quasi-emperor cultivator, possessing millions of Tao crystal, he could be said to be rich, and his wealth was astonishing. As for the 100 million Tao crystal, this astronomical number would definitely make an emperor realm cultivator drool and green with envy. But now, Xing Lianqi and Shan Yong had asked for 100 million Tao crystal. This was no longer as simple as collecting the tributes, it was simply forcing Jilin to his death. Jilin was stunned for a while before he said in a low voice, "Two lords, this 100 million Tao crystal is not a small number, small slap." Before he finished speaking, Shan Yong slapped Jilin's face again, causing him to fly out. His cheeks were red and swollen, and blood spurted out from his mouth and nose. Many cultivators in the city had been watching for a long time. When they saw this scene, they could not help but gasp. The two quasi-emperors under the command of the He Kong region lord were simply too overbearing. It even made people suspect that they were not here to collect the tributes, but purely to find trouble with Ji Lung and avenge the dead Taoist crocodile. Now I'll give you two choices. 1. Hand over the 100 million Tao crystal, and we will let bygones be bygones. Shan Yong looked arrogant and his eyes were cold. 2. Die. His words were concise, but his killing intent was overflowing. Xing Lianqi sighed and said, "Sai Jiling, we are also helping Lord He Kong to do something, don't make it too difficult for us. You should know that even if you die now, there will be a new city lord tomorrow to help us take care of these 4 cities." Taking a deep breath, Ji Ling suppressed the anger in his heart. He got up from the ground and said in a low voice, "Two lords, can you give me some time to prepare? After all, this is really not a small number." Xing Lianqi immediately smiled, appearing extremely benevolent. "Sure, go ahead. We will leave in the time it takes for a joss stick to burn. I hope you won't disappoint us then." Shan Yong said coldly, "There's one more thing. I heard that there's someone called the Sword Demon Dao Abyss in Great Lapis City. Recently, his performance has been very conspicuous. Why didn't he come out with you to welcome us? Could it be that he looks down on us?" Ji Lung was stunned, and he hurriedly smiled apologetically. "Sirs, please calm your anger. Senior Dao Yuan is at the critical moment of his closed-door cultivation, and he's truly unable to split himself, can't split into 2? Shan Yong's eyes turned cold. What arrogance! If that's the case, why don't we take the initiative to meet him? His voice was filled with threats and dissatisfaction. Jiling's expression was gloomy. He could endure the humiliation of being slapped twice in public. After all, he had to survive in the dark world. When it was time to bow his head, he could throw all his dignity and integrity to the back of his head. But he didn't dare to disturb Lin Sun because of this. Humph! Jiling's hesitant attitude made Shan Yong's face turn gloomy. "Jiling, I think you don't want to live." He raised his hand and was about to slap Jiling again. Just at this moment, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded. "Kneel down." Just 2 words, plain and natural. Jiling immediately recognized that it was Lin Sun's voice. He couldn't help but tremble in his heart. In the end, he still disturbed this ruthless person. At the same time, he also felt dizzy and almost couldn't believe it. Kneel down? They were the 2 quasi-emperor generals under the command of the He Kong region lord. Their status was high and their combat strength was strong enough to make any ruthless person who made a living in this territory tremble in fear. But now, Senior Dao Yuan said that he wanted them to kneel down. Jilin couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. But what happened next caused him to be completely dumbfounded. Because when the word "kneel down" fell, Shan Yong and Xing Lianqi, who were standing in the void, fell fiercely to the ground as if they had been suppressed by a terrifying force. They wanted to struggle, but their knees were directly broken, blood splattered, and then they knelt down together. Bang! Bang! Two muffled sounds were heard, and the ground collapsed. Looking at the scene again, the previously arrogant and cold Shan Yong and Xing Lianqi were both prostrating on the ground and kneeling outside the city gate of Daming City. Furthermore, this was merely the power produced by a single voice. Just 2 words. If they were told to kneel down, they had to kneel down, just like a god whose words were the law. The scene was dead silent. Ji Ling opened his eyes wide, and there was an uncontrollable roar in the depths of his heart. That Senior Dao Yuan was not a saint at all, but was most likely a quasi-emperor, and he was not comparable to an ordinary quasi-emperor. Inside the city, many experts who saw this scene were stunned, both physically and mentally shocked. In this silent atmosphere, Lin Sun's tall figure appeared above the city gate. His clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind, and he was indifferent like a banished immortal. He looked down at the 2 quasi-emperors who were kneeling on the ground, and his eyes were as calm as an ancient well. No matter how much tribute should be handed over to the Heikong region lord, I will not give a piece less, and those that should not be handed over, I will not give a piece more. You 2 have broken the rules. On the ground, Shan Yong and Xing Lianqi looked livid, and their hearts were filled with anger and fear. Just the power produced by a voice could easily suppress them. How could they not understand that they had kicked an iron plate this time? Don't talk nonsense, kill us if you have the guts. Shan Yong gritted his teeth. Even if he was afraid, he was full of confidence, and that was in the territory controlled by the Heikong region lord. He did not believe that Lin Sun dared to kill them. Unfortunately, his so-called confidence might be able to shock others, but it did not work on Lin Sun at all. Bang! With a muffled sound, Shan Yong's kneeling body was completely paralyzed on the ground. His spirit was crushed, and his eyes were wide open, as if he could not believe what had happened. It's easy to die. Lin Sun looked indifferent, as if he had not killed a 3rd-stage quasi-emperor, but an ant that was not worth mentioning. The understatement made Xing Lianqi could not help screaming, "Senior, please don't be angry, please don't be angry, I know I was wrong." He kowtowed crazily, and his heart was drowned by boundless fear. For thousands of years, it was the first time that he saw such a ruthless man who was not afraid of the Heikong region lord in the territory controlled by the Heikong region lord. This was undoubtedly terrible. "If you are wrong, you have to pay the price," Lin Sun said. "Tell me, who asked you to come here to make trouble? Don't tell me that an emperor like the Heikong region lord will think about avenging a dead man like Taoist crocodile." Xing Lianqi's expression changed. After a while, he said disappointedly, "I was blinded by lard and was bewitched by others. That's why I came with Shan Yong to deliberately make things difficult for you. The purpose is not to avenge Taoist crocodile, but to suppress your arrogance." It turned out that when Xing Lianqi and Shan Yong came here, they had received some benefits from some city lords in order to let hope use them to suppress Lin Sun and Ji Lung. The reason was that Lin Sun and Ji Lung rose too fast and expanded their territory too rapidly, which seriously threatened the other city lords in this territory. Knowing this, Lin Sun was not surprised, but Ji Lung said angrily, "Well, I knew it would not be so simple. So, the Heikong region lord doesn't know what you 2 have done at all?" Xing Lianqi bowed his head and acquiesced. They had received money from others to eliminate disasters for them. But this time, they had kicked an iron plate. What else could they say? "Senior, please forgive me. I promise that this kind of thing will never happen again," Xing Lianqi begged in a trembling voice. Lin Sun said indifferently, "I can forgive you once, but I don't know whether the Heikong region lord will forgive you after you go back this time." Then, he told Ji Ling, "Give him the tribute and let him go." But, Ji Ling still wanted to say something, but Lin Sun's figure had already disappeared from the top of the city wall. "You're lucky." Ji Ling glanced at Xing Lianqi with resentment. In next to no time, Xing Lianqi carried the feeling of having survived a calamity as he left hastily with the tribute that Ji Lung handed over. Shan Yong is the right-hand man of the He Kong region lord, but now he was killed by you. Wait and see, the He Kong region lord will never let you go. Xing Lianqi, who was fleeing in panic, was sure that he really survived this time when he couldn't see the Daming City anymore. On the same day, the news that Shan Yong was killed and Xing Lianqi fled spread out. It immediately caused a stir in the Daming City and set off a great uproar. Later on, the news spread to the other cities nearby, causing an uproar for a while. He actually dared to kill the general under the command of the He Kong region lord. Is the sword devil Tao Yuan crazy? He's finished. This is destined to be a great disaster. In all these years, no one has ever dared to kill the people of the He Kong region lord. Let's go. We can't stay in the Daming City any longer. Maybe one day, the anger of the He Kong region lord will be vented. The fish in the moat will be affected by the fire in the city gate. From this day on, many experts who originally lived in the 4 cities of the Daming City, the Flame Sin City, the Beidou City, and the Caltrip Corner City left in a hurry. The reason was very simple. It was because Lin Sun killed the people of the He Kong region lord. When they learned of this news, the city lords of the other cities in this territory were overjoyed. They didn't expect that the sword devil Tao Yuan would be so bold and dare to poke such a big hornet's nest. This was completely courting death. Wait and see, the He Kong region lord will definitely not give up. If the sword devil Tao Yuan is smart, he will definitely not dare to stay in the Daming City anymore. Otherwise, he is destined to be in trouble. Many city lords were looking forward to it excitedly. For a time, the situation changed. The Daming City, which was favored by countless experts, suddenly became a dangerous place of trouble. No one believed that the sword devil Tao Yuan could withstand the anger of the He Kong region lord. The moon is bright in my hometown. I wish everyone a happy Mid-Autumn festival. Chapter 2165. The wind was whistling. The Daming City had just been lively for a few days. With the news that Lin Sun had offended the governor of He Kong City, the whole city suddenly returned to its original state and even became more desolate than before. The governor's mansion. Senior, how about we run away? Jiling gritted his teeth with a fierce look flashing in his eyes. There are 10 governors in the whole Cold Sky territory. Each of them controls different territories. If the governor of He Kong City can't tolerate us, we can go to other territories. Even if the whole Cold Sky territory can't tolerate us, we can go to other territories. After a pause, he continued, as the saying goes, if there is no place for you here, there will be another place for you. With your strength, why worry about not being able to make a comeback? Lin Sun sat cross-legged on the ground, feeling the mystery of the scarlet flame Taoist figure which had just condensed its consciousness and cultivation. Hearing this, he said casually, "Don't you think too much? Think too much?" Ji Lung was stunned for a moment and then became anxious. Senior, as far as I know, although the governor of He Kong City is an emperor, he is narrow-minded and will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. We killed Shan Yong, so he will definitely not let us go. Before he finished, he was interrupted by Lin Sun. Things are not that bad yet. If you want to leave, you can leave now. If you want to stay, I promise you won't be in trouble. Jiling was shocked for a while. He couldn't guess where Lin Sun's confidence came from. Go. Lin Sun waved his hand and ordered him to leave. Then I won't bother you anymore, Senior. Jiling left with doubts in his mind. Should he leave or stay? Lin Sun didn't care about Jiling's feelings. With a thought, the scarlet flame Taoist figure in a red robe appeared. Just yesterday, he successfully condensed the consciousness and cultivation of the scarlet flame Taoist figure, which could save a lot of time and energy for Lin Sun's practice. From today on, you will practice the 9 Cauldrons World Suppression Scripture, the Scripture of Burning Tao, the 3 talents returning method and the impartation of no return. Lin Sun imparted the power he possessed to the scarlet flame Taoist figure through his consciousness. Among them, the scripture of burning Tao was the supreme inheritance created by the 5th senior brother Qi Jun. Senior brother Qi Jun was a terrible existence that even senior sister Ra Su admitted that she was not as good as him. The Taoist scripture he inherited was no trivial matter. The 3 talents returned to origin method was a Taoist scripture created by the 15th senior brother Qing Ting, and it was equally marvelous. The 3 scripture of cultivation was created by the 15th senior brother Qing. After imparting several kinds of inheritance, Lin Sun put away the scarlet flame Taoist body. With the green wood Taoist body and the scarlet fire Taoist body to help me cultivate and comprehend the great Tao, I'll be able to condense the yellow earth Taoist body's consciousness and Tao in less than a month. Cultivation Ling, the most, and the Tao of Tian, the sect of the Taoist Tao Sun. And the Lin, the Chen. Tao. The most amazing thing was that the increase in cultivation also caused the power of the Great Path clone to increase along with it. His cultivation had also improved greatly. At this rate of cultivation, I will be able to comprehend all the parts of the quasi-emperor realm in the Taoist scriptures and turn them into my own before I become an emperor. Only by learning from others and mastering them will I be able to build a strong foundation. My Tao is to contain all the Taoists in the world and develop all the laws in the world. Only in this way can I be the only one. Lin Sun fell into deep thought. While waiting for Shi, he realized that if he did not improve his combat strength as soon as possible, the situation in the future would only become more and more dangerous. Cold Sky Territory, Tianwu Mountain. The mountain was tens of thousands of feet high and majestic. From the foot of the mountain to the top, ancient and magnificent buildings meandered all the way to the top of the mountain. Apart from that, there were layers upon layers of obscure and terrifying restrictive formations that enveloped the entire heavenly martial mountain. In a snow-white palace at the top of the mountain, the Regent Lord He Kong sat on the central seat. He frowned slightly and his eyes were frightening. He was dressed in a black robe, and his thick blood-colored long hair was draped over his shoulders, revealing a handsome and fair face, and a pair of deep eyes that were brighter than the stars. The Regent Lord He Kong, whose Taoist name was He Kong Evil Emperor, appeared in the Dark World 139,000 years ago. There were different opinions about his origin. Some said that he used to be the supreme elder of a primordial imperial clan. Because he made an unforgivable mistake, he was suppressed by the clan. After he luckily escaped, he sneaked into the Dark World. Some said that he was an old monster of the Heavenly Ghost Fighting Clan, one of the 10 great fighting clans. Because he had killed too many people, he was wanted by many great forces and was forced to hide in the Dark World. There were also people who said, in short, no matter what the story was, it only proved that the He Kong Evil Emperor was very strong. He was so strong that even the legends about him had a chilling taste to them. The hall was silent. Xing Lianqi knelt on the ground. He was anxious and didn't dare to breathe loudly. A single voice was able to suppress the two of you. From the looks of it, this so-called sword demon Tao Abyss is also an incredible character. After a long time, the He Kong Evil Emperor sighed with emotion. Xing Lianqi gritted his teeth and said, "Your Majesty, no matter how great this man is, he has already provoked your Majesty. He can't be tolerated." The He Kong Evil Emperor sneered. "Xing Lianqi, let me ask you, why did he only kill Shan Yong, but let you live and come to see me with tributes?" Xing Lianqi was stunned. Before he could speak, the He Kong Evil Emperor said coldly, "If you don't tell me the truth, don't blame me for being rude." Xing Lianqi suddenly shivered, and his expression changed. When he reported to the He Kong Evil Emperor before, he did conceal some facts and only said some words that were unfavorable to Lin Sun. But obviously, his careful thoughts were seen through. Your Majesty, I know my mistake. Xing Lianqi showed a look of fear and sorrow, and kowtowed to the ground fiercely. I just want to know the truth. The Heikong evil emperor was expressionless. If you don't tell me, when I find out, you will only die more miserably. Xing Lianqi's face changed greatly. He took a deep breath and forced himself to tell the truth, including how he and Shan Yong received benefits from those city lords and how they suppressed Lin Sun and Jilin. He didn't dare to hide anything at all. After hearing this, the Heikong evil emperor laughed, but the smile made Xing Lianqi's hair stand on end, and his soul almost came out of his body. A dog bites when it's cornered, let alone extorting 100 million Tao gems. When the Heikong evil emperor stood up, there was no trace of a smile on his face. If it were me, I would have killed you long ago. There are indeed no rules to speak of in this world of darkness. However, in my territory, the rules set by me are the greatest rules. However, I never imagined that you would dare to break my rules for the sake of some so-called benefits. You guys sure have guts. Xing Lianqi was soaked with cold sweat, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He suddenly thought of Lin Sun's words, I can forgive you, but it depends on whether Region Lord Heikong will forgive you. It was also at this time that he discovered that compared with the death of his subordinates, Region Lord Heikong cared more about the rules he had set, but they were violated and broken by his subordinates. I must avenge Shan Yong's death. After all, he was my subordinate after all. I can't just sit back and watch him being killed like this. The Heikong evil emperor thought, but before you take revenge, don't you think you should pay for your mistakes? Xing Lianqi's face was full of fear. Your Honor, although I made some mistakes, I don't deserve to die. No, you must die. Heikong evil Arch had a serious look on his face. If you die, I will be able to avenge you more confidently, right? Before his voice died away, he stretched out his hand and gently plucked it in the air. Puff! Xing Lianqi's head was picked off like a fruit and fell into the palm of the Heikong evil emperor.